The letter came on a Tuesday in the 4th month. It had a seal I did not know. I have had 4 years of letters out here. Most of them are about grain, some are about a boundary stone. One last summer was a complaint about a goat. None of them have ever had a crown pressed into the wax. Osric brought it in, put it on the table, and did not leave the room. That is how I knew. He is a man who delivers a thing and goes. I opened it. It was 4 lines long. Crown letters usually are. The Chancery had read my returns. They had noted the population. They had noted the 4 grants in association. A man would come in the 8th month to make an assessment of the Ashmarch, and I was to hold myself available. That is the whole of it. 4 lines and a date. I sat with it for a while. For 11 years nobody has come out here. Not once. That is not neglect, whatever it looks like from the outside. That neglect is the only reason any of this exists. Nobody rode out to ask why I was boring guns. Nobody asked why a barony of 1,900 people had 600 of them drilling with matchlocks. Nobody asked how 4 grants had come under one man's court without a word from the crown. I have spent 4 years being too small to be worth the ride. That is finished now, and I did it to myself. Here is the part I want to put down plainly, because I have watched men get this wrong and I nearly got it wrong myself. The letter is not a threat. There is no accusation in it. Nobody has charged me with anything. It is worse than that. It is attention, a charge you can answer. You go to a court, you take your papers, you make your case, and at the end of it a man in a chair says yes or no. That is a fight with a shape. Attention has no shape. A man is coming to look at everything, not one thing, everything. Every ledger, every return, every muster roll, every yard of what I have built. And he is not coming to prove a case. He is coming to find out what is here. I would rather be accused of one crime than looked at for 4 months. I called nobody that first day. I want that on the record because it is the only sensible thing I did all week. Instead, I got the returns out. My own returns. I have sent one to the Chancery every quarter for 4 years in my own hand, all of them honest. I have never seen the point of lying to a ledger. Then I read them the way a stranger would. That took me 2 days, and it was not a pleasant 2 days. Here is what a careful man finds in my own paperwork without leaving his chair, without a single witness, using nothing but what I have volunteered. Guns. 4 bored bronze pieces made in my own forge by my own smith without a license. There is no license for it. The right to cast ordnance is held by the crown and by 4 great houses, and I am neither. I wrote the guns into my returns myself in the 3rd year under works. I was rather proud of them. Men. 280 standing, 640 drilled. That is 920 men who answer to me and to nobody else on a charter that permits me a levy for the defense of my own ground. 600 farmers who can load in 11 counts is not a levy. I do not know what it is. Neither does the law, which is the problem. Ground. 4 grants in association. Harrowgate, Kelmere, Elderhithe, Coombe. Not one of them granted to me. Not one of them taken by force. Every one of them came in by its own vote in its own chapel in writing. I have the instruments. They are good instruments. They are also from a chancery desk 6 weeks away, indistinguishable from a man quietly assembling a small country. And me. 200 people watch me do something on a wall in the 3rd month that none of them can explain, and all of them have told somebody about. That is the case. It writes itself. I wrote most of it. Osric said one thing at the end of the 2nd day. Every line of it is true, my lord. That is what I cannot get past. There is nothing in there to correct. Which is exactly right, and it is the shape of the whole summer. For 4 years my method has been the same. Put true things into the world. Let people arrive at the wrong end of them. It worked on Voss. It worked on a horse chief with 40,000 people behind him. It does not work on a man who has come to read the ledger. You cannot mislead somebody who only wants the numbers, and my numbers are correct, and my numbers convict me. I did 4 things that week. I'm going to set them all down because 3 of them were right and 1 of them was cowardice. I sent for Cassia, who was at Saltmouth about the salt, and who knows more about how the crown thinks than everybody else in this barony put together. I told Gareth to change nothing about the drill. Not one thing. If a man comes in the 8th month to see whether I have an army, he will see an army, and hiding it would be both useless and an admission. I told Osric to open the books to me completely. every return, every muster, every instrument, 4 years of it, and to do it as though he were the assessor and I were the accused. And I did not answer Idris Hale's letter. It has been on my desk since the 11th month. That is 9 months now. He asked me a plain question politely in a letter he had clearly written more than once, and every week I do not answer it, the answer gets worse. I'm about to need a friendly lord in a room very badly. Idris Hale is the only one I have. I looked at that letter on the Thursday of that week and I put a ledger on top of it. The reports started coming in the 2nd week of the 4th month, and they did not stop for 2 months. I want to explain how they reach me, because it matters to how much of this I believe. Kessa runs collection. Her sources are carters, ferrymen, innkeepers, horseboys, and laundresses, and most of them do not know they are anything at all. They talk to her people because her people buy things and ask ordinary questions. Every report comes in on the same form. The date, where the man was standing, what he saw with his own eyes, kept strictly apart from what he was told by somebody else, who told him, and a number from 1 to 5 for how much we trust the source. Rating the source instead of believing the man is not done anywhere else in Valdrin. Osric files each one twice, by person and by house, so a name that turns up in 3 different reports rises to the top on its own. I set that up 2 years ago to watch one earl. That summer it told me what had happened to a kingdom. Here is the shape of it from about 40 reports rated 3 or better. Torun's host came through the eastern passes in the 3rd month, exactly when the Dominion said it would. 2,000 of them turned aside to Duncairn. The other 9,000 went east into the settled country, and behind them came the carts and the herds and the 40,000 people. Nobody stopped them. Nobody could have. There is no wall east of the passes. There was never any reason to build one. That country has been quiet for 400 years, and quiet country grows villages with no ditch, no gate, and no watch. The host did not besiege anything. It did not need to. It walked across 200 miles of good farmland in 6 weeks, taking what it wanted as it went, and the only thing anybody could do was be somewhere else when it arrived. I am going to set down what that meant in numbers because the numbers are the only honest way to do it. Grain. 11 of the great tithe barns along the eastern road were emptied. 2 more were burnt, and I think both of those were accidents rather than policy. That is most of a year's surplus for 4 counties. Herds. Gone. Not slaughtered, driven. A horse-people moving house takes cattle with it, and cattle walk. Villages. My best count is 110 emptied. Emptied, not destroyed. That is a real difference, and I want to be exact about it. Most of those places are still standing. The people left before the riders came because word moved faster than horses, and a village that runs in time loses its year and not its lives. Dead between 800 and 1400 across the whole eastern reach over 6 weeks. That last number is lower than anybody expected, and it is not mercy. It is that Torun did not want a war. He wanted to get 40,000 people to grass. Fighting a country costs men he cannot replace, so he took what was in the barns and kept walking. Wentbridge is the one that stayed with me. It is a market town on the eastern road, about the size of Duncairn, with a stone bridge and 400 years of charters. The host went round it. They took the barns outside the walls, and they did not spend 1 man on the walls themselves. 400 years of charters, and it was saved by not being worth the trouble. The crown mustered in the 4th month. I want to be fair about this, because it is easy to be superior from behind a finished wall. Raising a royal host is not a thing anybody can do quickly. Writs go out. Great houses send their levies. Men come in from 400 miles. It takes 8 weeks in a good year, and this was not a good year because the writs went out after the grain was already gone. The host that finally moved east was 11,000 men, which is a real army and would have been enough. It arrived in the 6th month. Torun had been across the passes and gone since the 5th. So the crown spent a season and an enormous amount of money assembling a force that arrived to look at empty barns. Then it had to feed 11,000 men in a country with no grain in it, which made everything worse for the people who had stayed. Nobody did anything stupid. That is what I keep coming back to. Every man in that chain did his job at the speed the job can be done. It simply was not fast enough, and there is no version of it that would have been. The capital took it hardest, and not in the way you would think. The capital was never in danger. It is 300 miles from the passes, and the host never came within 150. Nobody in that city saw a rider. What the capital got was the bread price. 4 counties of grain went east in 6 weeks. The capital eats from those counties. By the 6th month, bread in the capital cost 3 times what it cost at the turn of the year, and by the 7th month there was rationing at the gate markets, and in the 8th month there was a riot at one of them that the reports rate 4 for reliability, and which nobody in the chancery has written down anywhere I can find. A city does not need to be attacked to be hurt. It only needs to be fed by somewhere that was. And then there is us. We lost 19 people. 2 in the gallery, 2 at shaft 11, 2 boys at the top of the ramp, and 13 along the north face across one afternoon. We lost no grain at all. The barns were full when it started and fuller when it ended, because the forecourse came in behind the battle. Not one village on the tunnel line was burnt. Not one person on my ground went hungry that summer. In the 8 weeks after the 14th day, 1,140 people walked in from somewhere else and asked to stay. 4 counties lost a year. I gained 1. I've read that sentence back several times, and I cannot make it sound like anything other than what it is. Osric put the 2 sets of figures side by side on one sheet at the end of the 5th month. He did not say anything about it. He put it down and went out. I looked at it for a long time. Everything I had done for 5 months was defensive. Every single piece of it. The wall, the drill, the carts, the water, the lie. All of it was built to keep 2,000 riders off 1,900 people, and it did exactly that and nothing more. I did not save the eastern reach. I never tried to. I did not send 1 man, 1 cart, or 1 warning east of the passes, and it did not occur to me to do it, and I have gone looking for the moment when it should have occurred to me, and I cannot find one. What I built was a wall around my own. That is not a crime. There is no law that says a frontier lord owes anything to a market town 300 miles away. But a man is going to come here in the 8th month with those same 2 sets of figures in his satchel. He is going to lay them out on my own table. And the question he asks will not be how did you fail. It will be how did you manage it, and why did nobody else? I did not sleep much that week either. I was not there for any of this. I have put it together from prisoners, from traders who crossed the passes in the 6th month, and from 1 man who came back. Where I am guessing, I have said so. The far grass is 80 miles east of the passes, and it is good. That is the first thing. It is better ground than the plains they came out of in every way that matters. There is a river that runs all year. There is winter shelter under a line of hills. There is grazing that has been rested for 400 years because nobody has ever needed it. 40,000 people came onto it in the 5th month, and by the 6th they had stopped moving. They had 11 of the great tithe barns behind them and the herds of 4 counties walking with them. Nobody in that camp went hungry that summer. Nobody had gone hungry since the passes. By any measure Toran understands, the crossing worked. He set out to walk a nation to water before the grass failed, and he did it, and he lost 1,100 people on the way and 2,000 more at my wall. 3,100 out of 40,000. He knows both numbers. He keeps both numbers. Now the part that concerns me. 2,000 men went to Duncairn. About 500 came back. They did not come back with a story about a wall. That is the thing I keep turning over. A man who has been beaten by a wall says the wall was high. There is no shame in a high wall. What those 500 came back with was worse for me because it was accurate. They said there was no wall. They said there was a bank of earth about as tall as a man, and a ditch you could not see until you were in it, and a slope with nothing on it. They said the guns did not stop, and the muskets did not stop. And they said that they never got within reach of anybody who mattered. That last part is the one that will cost me. 2,000 men spent an afternoon on my ground, and almost none of them ever saw a defender's face. Toran took them apart the way he takes everything apart. 1 man at a time in his own tent, the same questions in a different order, a counter writing it down. It took him 11 days. I have that from a trader who was in the camp for 4 of them, rated 3. At the end of it, he had the thing he had been missing since the 11th month. Not the trick, the fact. He worked out that the ponds were not dry by accident. I do not know exactly how. My guess, and I am marking it as a guess, is that it was the 4th pond. 3 dry pans in a wet season is bad luck. The 4th one is a decision, and Toran is a man who counts things, and 4 is where counting starts to mean something. He sent a rider back to look at the ground above the 1st pond in the 7th month. The rider found a shallow cut along the contour, a quarter-mile up, grassed over and perfectly ordinary. That is not a secret anymore. Here is what he did about it, and it is not what a war chief in a story does. He did not come back. He had 9,000 men, a nation that was fed, and a grievance. He could have turned round in the 6th month and spent the summer on me, and I would have had 1 wall, 4 guns, and no fresh powder worth speaking of. He did not, and I have thought about why for a long time, and I think the answer is that Toran does not spend men on things that do not feed anybody. Coming back in the 6th month buys him nothing. His people are on good grass. The wall does not move. I am not going anywhere. So he did the thing I would have done, which is the most unsettling sentence in this account. He started learning. What he has done since, as far as we can tell, is this. He has kept every one of the 500 who came back together as one band, and he has had them describe the ground to other people, over and over all summer. He has had men digging trial ditches on the far grass. A trader saw 4 of them, freshly cut on flat ground with nothing to drain. Rated 3. They were being filled in and cut again. He has sent riders west, not east, twice, small parties, 6 and 9, going the long way round the passes and not stopping anywhere. We lost both of them past the salt. Kessa is not pleased about it, and neither am I, and he has been buying grain, not taking, buying at the eastern markets in coin at fair prices through factors. That last one frightens me more than the ditches. A man who is raiding takes what he needs. A man who is provisioning is planning a season away from home. Osric asked me the obvious question at the end of the 7th month. What do we do about it? I said nothing. Not yet. I have a crown assessor arriving in 3 weeks and 920 men I am not legally entitled to. If I raise a finger toward the passes before that man has been and gone, I hand him the case. So the answer for this summer is that Toran learns, and I sit still and let him, and both of us know it. One more thing, and then I will leave him alone until he comes back. The counter who brought me the book of names in the 5th month said something on the doorstep to Kasha that I have not been able to put down. She asked him in the ordinary way whether the chief was well. He said Toran had asked him one question when he got back. Not about the wall, not about the guns. He asked whether the man at Duncairn had counted his dead as well. They came up the southern road all summer, 1,140 in the 8 weeks after the battle. Another 900 across the 5th and 6th months. By the end of the 7th month I had taken in 2,040 people, and they were still arriving at about 30 a week. I want to describe what that actually looks like because I had it wrong in my head for 4 years. I used to imagine settlers as people choosing a place, weighing it up, deciding. Nobody on that road had decided anything. They had walked out of somewhere with what they could carry, and then they had kept walking, and Duncairn was simply the first place that had food in it. They came in families, and they came in pieces of families. A cooper from the eastern reach with a wife and 4 children and a wheelbarrow. 2 brothers with nothing. A woman of about 60 with 3 grandchildren, and no explanation of where the middle generation had gone, and nobody asked her. Most of them had walked between 80 and 200 miles. The thing that marked them was not hunger. Most were thin and none were starving because it was summer and there is food in a hedge in summer. It was their feet. You could tell how far a family had come by looking at the children's feet, and after about the 4th week I stopped being able to do it without going somewhere afterwards. Here is the problem, and it is not the one you would expect. I wanted them. I have wanted them for 4 years. Every single thing I have built out here has been gated on people. The tunnel needed diggers. The trace needed 400. The rotation needs hands. 600 drilled men come out of a population, and a bigger population makes more of them without taking one man off the land. 2,000 people arriving is the best thing that has happened to this barony since the water ran. and I could not simply open the gate for 3 reasons, and all 3 of them are the sort of thing nobody thanks you for. The first is water, and it is arithmetic. The tunnel gives me enough for 6,400 people at the rate a person actually drinks in a dry month. That is not a guess. It is measured twice a year at the outfall. I had 3,600 at the start of the summer. 2,000 more takes me to 5,600. That is inside the number. It is not comfortably inside it. So every person I took in that summer, I took in against a figure I keep on a board, and the board went up week by week all summer, and I watched it the way you watch a rising river. The second is food, and it is timing. The 4-course came in that spring, and it was the best harvest this ground has ever produced. I will put the number down later in this account in its place. But a harvest is a year. 2,000 extra people eat from the 7th month onward, and the next harvest is 13 months away. And if I am wrong about the surplus, I do not find out in a meeting. I find out in the 2nd month, in a barn, in front of people who came here because I had food. The third is the one I have no answer to. Every one of those 2,000 came from somewhere. Somewhere with a lord and a court, and rolls with their names on. A cooper who walks 80 miles is not just a cooper. He is a cooper who is not in his lord's village anymore. I have been very careful about this for 4 years. I sent a bonded man back once, with food and ferry fare, because harboring him would have turned my whole charter into a case of enticement. Myra did not speak to me for 2 days, and I did not defend myself. Now 2,000 of them have walked in at once, and a crown assessor is coming in the 8th month. So I did the only thing I could think of, which was to write it all down before anybody asked me to. Every person who came in that summer went into a book on the day they arrived. Name, where from, whose ground, what they can do, whether they were bonded, and if they said no, that they said no. 2,040 entries. Osric took on 4 clerks for it, and it cost me money I would rather have spent on almost anything else. Ren Alder asked me why. I told him that in 3 months a man was going to ask me where these people came from, and I intended to be the one holding the answer. He said that was a strange way to run a rescue. He is right. I did not enjoy it either. There were mornings on that road when I was standing at a table with a clerk asking a woman which parish she had left, while she stood there with her children and worked out whether the answer would get her turned away. I never turned anybody away that summer. Not one. But she did not know that when she was answering, and I could see her not knowing it. 2 things came out of that book that I did not expect. The first, of 2,040 people, 11 said they were bonded when we asked. 11 out of 2,000. I had expected hundreds. This world runs on bond in a dozen counties. Myra worked out why before I did. A bonded man does not walk 200 miles to a place that keeps a book. He goes somewhere with no book at all. My paperwork was doing the sorting for me, and it was doing it before anybody arrived, and I do not entirely like what that says about my paperwork. What I did with the 11 is in the record, and I am not going to dress it up. I sent word to 4 houses about 7 of them, and heard nothing back from any of the 4, and after 60 days the law says I have discharged the duty. The other 4 I could not place at all because the ground they came off no longer has a lord on it. So I kept all 11 lawfully on a technicality, and I know exactly what I did. The second, the book turned out to be the best survey of the Eastern Reach that exists anywhere. 2,000 people telling you what parish they left in order over 4 months is a map of where a kingdom broke. Osric had it sorted by district inside a fortnight. You can see the host's line of march in it. You can see which places emptied and which held. I did not build that on purpose. I built a list to protect myself from a lawyer. It is going to matter in the 8th month, and I did not know that when I started it. The last thing about that summer, and then I will move on. Myra came and found me at the gate table in the 6th month on a bad afternoon when the line was longer than the light. 4 years ago you had 400 people and a hedge. Look up. I looked up. There were about 90 people in that line, and behind them a road with more on it, and behind that a town with a wall around it and grain in it and water under it. Myra said, "They are not coming here because you are kind. They are coming here because it works." Then she took the pen off me and told me to go and eat something and finished the afternoon herself. Kasia got back from Saltmouth in the 5th month. I told her about the letter in the yard before she was off the horse. She read it twice. Then she asked one question. "Who signed it?" I had not looked. I had read 4 lines about an assessment and a date, and I had not looked at the name at the bottom. She turned it over and found it and went very still. Kasia said Corvin asked. I should explain who that is because it changes everything and I did not see it at first. Corvin Ask is a chancery assessor. He is about 60, small, gray and precise, with wire spectacles and ink on the side of one hand. He has been in Crown service for 22 years. He came out here 2 years ago on Voss's petition to review my charter and find me wanting. Voss had guided him the whole way. Instead, Ask went out on foot to 9 separate stations and checked Kessa's blight markers himself in the rain at 60 years old. Then he read Voss's 14 years of returns against my survey and found that Voss had been concealing the death of 400 square miles of Crown land for a decade. He wrote the report that made me a baron. He is the reason I have a charter at all. He is also completely incorruptible, and that is the whole problem. Here is why I would rather have had almost anybody else. Every man I have beaten in 4 years, I have beaten the same way. I find out what he wants to be true, and then I put true things in front of him until he arrives somewhere wrong on his own. Voss wanted me to be a failing boy with a dry tunnel. Torin wanted Duncairn to be a farm. In both cases, I did not lie once. I simply let a man walk down a road he had chosen. That method requires the other man to want something. Ask does not want anything. He wants the figures to be correct. That is not a weakness you can push on because there is nothing underneath it. You cannot flatter him, you cannot buy him, and you cannot lead him anywhere because he is not going anywhere. He is reading. Kasia put it better than I did. You have spent 4 years learning to fight men who want something. This one only wants to know what is here. That is why you are frightened, and you are right to be. She also explained why he stopped answering my letters, which I had been taking personally for the better part of a year. I wrote to him in the 10th month about Harrowgate's succession. Ned Eimer's page, the villages held in common and no instrument in the law to give it effect. It was a good letter. I never got a word back, and I wrote twice more and nothing. Kasia read the dates and said the obvious thing. He stopped answering because he had already been assigned to assess me. A man who is going to weigh you does not correspond with you first. Everything he wrote to me from that day would have been evidence, and everything I wrote to him would have been a man trying to get in early. He was not ignoring me. He was recusing himself. 9 months ago, which means the Chancery decided to look at the Ashmarch before the battle, before the wall was finished, before any of it. I had assumed I was being assessed because I won. I was being assessed because I had grown. So we spent 6 weeks building the case against me. Osric ran it, and he ran it properly. He sat on the other side of the table for the whole of it. I was not allowed to explain anything. I could produce documents and answer questions, and that was all. It was the worst 6 weeks of desk work I have ever done, and it is the reason the 8th month went the way it did. Here is what we found in order of how much it frightened me. The guns are the easiest, which surprised everybody. The right to cast ordnance is reserved. I cast 4 pieces without leave and wrote them into my own returns. But the reservation is written against founding, the casting of pieces for sale, for supply, for the arming of another man's ground. It exists to stop a house building an artillery train and selling it. I made 4 guns, kept 4 guns, used 4 guns on my own charter ground in defense of my own people, and sold none. Call is a village weaponsmith, not a foundry. That is not a defense that wins. It is a defense that makes the thing arguable, which is a different and better place to be than indefensible. Osric's verdict, a fine probably, and the pieces licensed after the fact at a price. The grants are harder, and the answer is a dead man's page. 4 grants came under my court. None of them were granted to me by the Crown. The one thing that saves it is that not one of them was taken. Everyone came in by a written vote, in its own chapel, under its own instrument, with a clause in each that lets them leave in the 5th month of any year without penalty. Harrowgate voted twice. The second time was in a quiet summer with no army anywhere near it, and 11 villages out of 11 voted to stay. Osric's verdict: this is the strongest thing I own and I should lead with it, because the crown has no form for it and men without a form dislike inventing a crime more than they dislike inventing a license. The men are the part that can hang me. 920. My charter allows a levy for the defense of my ground. The word levy means farmers with spears called up for a season and sent home. It does not mean 600 men who can load a matchlock in 11 counts on the 4th wet day, and it does not mean 280 standing, and everyone in that room knew it. Osric asked me the assessor's question, and would not let me get out of it. My lord, if the crown calls that levy tomorrow to march 400 miles against a man the crown names, do they come? I said I did not know. He wrote it down. Then he said that not knowing is the answer that convicts me, because a levy that might not come is not a levy, it is a retinue, and a retinue of 920 men on the frontier belongs to a duke, not to a baron. And then there is me, 200 witnesses. It has been out for 5 months, and it is in every market between here and the coast. There is no law against what I am. There is no law about it at all. That is not comfort. A thing with no law around it is a thing the crown gets to decide about from nothing, in a room I will not be in. At the end of the 6th week, Osric closed the last book and sat back and gave me his summary. I have it word for word because I wrote it down that night. Every charge is true, 2 are arguable, 1 is not, and none of that is what will decide it. I asked him what will decide it. Osric said whether it is worth their while. You are not a legal question, my lord. You are a decision about what to do with something they did not know they had. Then he went home, and I sat in that room with 4 years of my own honest paperwork stacked on the table, and I did the thing I had been putting off since the 4th month. I got out Idris Hale's letter, and I took the ledger off it, and I read it again. Idris Hale is 22 now. He holds a small warden's grant 3 days west of here, and he is the only man in the cohort I have never once had to be careful with. I met him at Perrin's 2 years ago. He had let a tenant's tithe stand over in a wet year, and 6 other wardens spent the evening laughing at him for it. He sat through it. He did not argue, and he did not go red. He had done a decent thing, and he had decided in advance to pay for it. Later that night he asked me about drainage, and I gave him the answer free in the courtyard with nothing attached to it. He wrote to me 11 days later. He has written 8 times since. The 9th letter is the one on my desk. He sent it in the 11th month, 3 days after the salt. I should say what he was asking about. In the 11th month, 600 reavers came at 11 unwalled shaft villages strung along 11 miles of the salt line, and I broke them with 4 guns from a hill they never came near. 11 shots, 31 of them dead. Not one of my men within 400 paces of any of it. That got out. Of course it got out. There were 300 salt workers standing in the open watching a hillside kill people 2/3 of a mile away. Hale's letter is 1 page. It is careful the way a man is careful when he has written a thing 3 times. He does not ask how I did it. He is too well-mannered for that, and he already knows I would not tell him. He asks whether it can be done from a standing position. That is the whole letter, more or less. Whether a lord with no guns, no smith, and 400 people can do anything at all about 600 men arriving at once, or whether the answer is simply that some men can and he is not one of them. And then a last line, which is the reason I could not answer it and could not throw it away. He wrote that he was not asking for himself. He has a village called Wend on his eastern edge, 41 households and no ditch. 9 months. I want to be honest about why, because none of the 3 reasons are good. The first is that the true answer is dangerous. What beat those 600 was not the guns. It was a book. 460 measured shots written down over 11 months, until a boy of 19 could read a range off a page and put a ball where it needed to go. The gun is expensive and slow. The book is paper and it copies. The second is worse. The drainage answer I gave him free in that courtyard is the one that has been eating at me since the autumn. Water goes downhill. An 11-mile ditch does not remove gray from the world. It moves it. Mine went toward Kelmere, and Osric found that out in a fortnight and put it on my desk without saying a word about it. So the honest letter to Idris Hale is not a favor. It says, here is how to save wind, and here is the arithmetic that tells you who pays for it, and you will have to look at that number yourself and decide. The third reason is the small one, and it is the true one. I did not know how to write it, so every week I did not, and every week the not writing got louder. Kasha read the letter in the 6th week, after Osric had finished building the case against me. In the 8th month a crown assessor sits in your hall. Who in this kingdom speaks for you? Name them. I said Osric. She said Osric is my clerk. I said the grants. She said the grants are mine, and a man's own people are not evidence. Kasha said, you have 4,000 people, 900 men and no friends. 6 other wardens hold this frontier. 3 of them are frightened of you. 1 cannot be read. 1 is buying his way into a count's family, and 1 has written to you 9 times. Then she said the thing I had got backwards for 9 months. Kasha said, you think answering him puts him in your debt. It does not. A gift makes a client. Give a man something that can ruin you and you have made an ally, because now you are both holding the same knife. I wrote it that night, and it took until nearly morning, and it came out at 9 pages. Here is what went in it. The drainage complete. Not the hint I gave him in a courtyard, the whole method. How to find the fall with a chain and a staff. How to cut numbered templates so a laborer never has to understand a gradient. How to pay by the corrected yard. How to check the level at night on a board in a chapel so that an error of 4 inches over 100 yards gets caught by a boy with a lamp instead of by a flood in the spring. Then the part that costs me, where his water will go. Which ground sits below wind, whose it is, and what will happen to it in the 4th year. I did the arithmetic for him rather than leave it for him to find, because a man who finds it himself concludes I hid it. Then the range tables. Not how to bore a gun. I do not have the right to hand that to anybody, and it is the charge that can still cost me. But the principle, that the reach of a piece is not a mystery and not a gift, that it is 460 shots, written down in the rain by somebody patient, and that any lord in Valdrin with 1 gun and a year could have what my 19-year-old has. And then the last page, which is the one I sat over longest. I told him the crown is coming to assess me in the 8th month, and that I have already been advised the assessment will not go easily, and that if it goes badly, everything in the preceding 8 pages is a letter from a man who has been found guilty of raising an army. I told him to burn it if that happened. I told him I would not think less of him. I did not answer Salter Dane. Dane wrote in the same fortnight, and his letter is cleverer than Hale's. He asked me a question about the water under his own western ground, the right question, the one that only makes sense if you already know what I know, and he has no business knowing to ask it. He may be the sharpest man on this frontier. He may also be reporting to somebody. I have no evidence for the second and no explanation for the first, and until I have one or the other his letter stays in the drawer. Kasha said that was correct, and also that I was going to be wrong about him eventually, in one direction or the other. 9 pages sealed, and I sat looking at it for longer than I want to write down. Every rule I have made for myself over 4 years says do not send this. It gives a man outside my walls the method, the arithmetic and the confession, and it does it 2 months before a crown officer arrives to read everything I own. I sent it anyway. Bram's grandson took it west at first light with 2 days' bread and instructions to put it into Hale's hand and nobody else's. Then I went down to the yard and watched him go out through the north gate and stood there a while after he was out of sight, which achieved nothing at all. The second sealed letter came 11 days after the first. I knew this seal. I have known it my whole life. A raven on a closed hand, pressed into black wax by a man who has never pressed it himself. Raven mark. My father. 4 years and 4 months, and not one word in either direction. I have explained before how I came to be here, but it is worth putting plainly again, because this letter only makes sense on top of it. I was the third son of Duke Corwin Vale. Third sons are a problem. There is one seat and an heir and a spare, and then there is you, and you are a claim standing about in a corridor waiting to become somebody's civil war. So the crown wrote a standing instrument, and 7 great houses each put a surplus son on a frontier charter inside 6 years. 7 boys, 7 pieces of bad ground, 7 charters. It was a policy for tidying up successions. That is the part that took me longest to swallow. I was not hated. I was processed. He sent Osric with me to write and tell him when I died. Osric never sent that letter. He has told me so himself. He stopped sending anything at all in the first year, once it became apparent I was not going to oblige him, which means my father has heard nothing about me from his own man in 4 years. Everything he knows, he read where anybody could read it. My quarterly returns in the chancery in my own hand. His letter is 9 lines. I will give you the shape of it rather than every word, because it is a very Raven-mark letter and it is mostly punctuation. He has read the returns. He has been informed of the action in the 3rd month. He notes that the assessment of the Ashmarch will fall in the 8th month, which means he knew about it before I did and probably a month before I did. He is sending assistance. It is listed. And then the last line, which is the only line in it that is not administration. He wrote that the house does not intend to hear about this from somebody else. That is the whole thing. That is my father entire. Not I am proud of you. Not I was wrong. The house does not intend to hear about this from somebody else. The column came in on the 4th day of the 6th month, and it took most of a morning to get through the north gate. Here is what was in it. Coin, 4,000 marks. To be clear about that number, my entire revenue last year, salt and tithe and carriage together, was under 600. This is not help. This is more money than has existed in the Ashmarch since it had a name. Iron. 11 tons of it in bar, which is the single thing I cannot make here and have been buying at a robbery price off the coast for 4 years. Men, 60. Not soldiers, I noticed that immediately, and I think it was deliberate. Masons, carpenters, 2 millwrights, a surveyor of 40 years, and 9 men whose trade is nothing but the cutting and setting of stone. And a name. He has written to the chancery. He has not written on my behalf, which he is careful to say. He has written to confirm that the warden of the Ashmarch is of his house. That last one is worth more than the 4,000 marks, and everybody in that yard who could read knew it. Tam found me at the gate about noon. He had a letter of his own out of one of the carts from his mother, who I did not know was still alive, and neither did he. He read it standing in the mud with his back to everybody, and then he came and stood beside me and did not say anything for a while. Tam said he's not sorry, you know that. I said I did. Just so we're both looking at the same thing. That is the most useful conversation I had all week, because here is what this actually is, and I want it written down while I can still see it clearly. My father did not read my returns and discover a son. He read them and discovered an asset. In a year when the kingdom lost 200 miles of settled country, 1 charter in Valdrin held produced a surplus, absorbed 4 grants and beat 2,000 men in the field. And that charter has his name on it, not the crown's. Not mine particularly, his. He is not sending me aid. He is taking possession of the only good news in the kingdom before somebody at court tells the story with a different family in it. It is not a father discovering pride. It is a filing error correcting itself. And I do not resent it. That surprised me. I sat with it for 2 days waiting to be angry, and the anger never came, because he has behaved exactly as I would predict, and a man who behaves predictably is the easiest kind to deal with. The danger is not the money. The danger is what the money makes me. 4,000 marks and 60 men and a duke's word at the chancery is not the sort of thing a house gives to a member it has finished with. It is what a house spends on a member it is thinking about putting back. And I was removed from that succession by an instrument of the crown, and my eldest brother Rowan is 31 and has 2 daughters and no son. I am not walking into that. Not this year and not in 10, but I would rather see the trap while the door is still open than find it in the dark. So I did the only thing I could think of that keeps it clean. I had Osric enter the whole of it as a debt. Every mark, every ton of iron, every man's wage, valued at coast prices, entered in the Duncairn book under obligations owing to the House of Vale, with a schedule of repayment over 11 years at no interest. Osric argued with me for an hour, which he almost never does. He said it was ungracious. He said a gift refused is an insult, and I had not even the excuse of refusing it because I was going to spend every penny. I said I was not refusing it. I was pricing it. A gift makes you a dependent. A debt makes you a debtor, and a debtor is a man with a schedule and an end date. In 11 years I hand over the last payment, and my father's house has no more claim on the Ashmarch than the coast factors do. Osric said, and if he refuses the repayment, then he refuses it in writing, and I keep that letter, and the next time somebody in Ravenmark says the frontier belongs to the house I put it on the table. Osric put his spectacles back on and ruled the column. I signed it that evening, 4,000 marks, 11 tons, 60 men, first payment due in the spring of the 5th year, and then I went and found the surveyor of 40 years and put him on the north wall before he had unpacked. There were 4 unopened letters by then, not 2. They had been in the same drawer in Cash's rooms for over a year, her father's hand on all 4. She had never once pretended they were not there, which is the part I found difficult. She simply did not open them, and she was not troubled by not opening them, and I never asked. I did ask, that summer. I had 4,000 marks of my father's money in the strong room, and I had just spent 9 pages being honest with a stranger, so I felt entitled. She said fine and got them, and opened all 4 at the table with a knife in order in front of me. I should say who Count Varon is, because I have been unfair about him in the past. Highmore is a county south of the March. Good ground, 12,000 people, no frontier and no grey. Varon is about 60, cautious to the point of being annoying, and he has spent 20 years keeping his county out of Earl Voss's mouth by never quite saying no to him. Cassia has run his correspondence since she was 19, not as a secretary. She wrote the letters, she took the meetings, and Highmore's policy for 6 years has largely been hers with her father's seal on the bottom of it. Then she came to Duncairn as Highmore's salt factor in her own name on a lawful posting, and she has been here since. The letters in order. The first, 11 months ago, is about the salt. He is pleased, he is proud, he asks her to be careful. It is a decent letter from a father to a daughter, and she was right to expect it, and it is the only one of the 4 like that. The second, 8 months ago, has Voss in it for the first time. Earl Voss has offered Highmore money, a great deal of money, and a marriage. Cash's younger sister Rilla, who is 17, to Voss's nephew and heir, Den. The third, 5 months ago, is shorter, and it is where the temperature changes. The match is agreed in principle. And there is a line in it, phrased as though her father were merely passing on a remark, in which Earl Voss has observed that Lady Cash's residence in Duncairn is an embarrassment to the arrangement. The 4th came in the 4th month of this year, 4 days after the battle. It instructs her to resign the factorship and come home before the 8th month. She read that one twice, put it down, and laughed once with no pleasure in it at all. Before the 8th month. He wants me out of here before the assessor arrives. Now, it would be easy to make Varon a coward here, and I did in my head for about an hour. Cassia would not let it stand. She went and got Highmore's accounts, which she still has copies of because nobody thought to stop sending them, and she made me look at the 4th month. Highmore lost its eastern quarter this season. The host came through on its way home and took 11 villages worth of standing grain and about 900 head of cattle. Varon's revenue for the year is down by 1/3. He has 2,000 people on relief, and he is buying bread at triple. Voss's money is not a bribe he wants. It is the only offer on the table from anybody. Cassia said he is not selling me. He is drowning, and Voss is the only man who has put out a hand, and the hand costs a daughter. He will take it. He is not a wicked man. He is a frightened one with a ledger. Which is worse in a way. You can beat a wicked man. Then she did the most Cassia thing she has ever done. She stopped reading them as a daughter and read them as a factor. She sat down with Highmore's accounts on one side and our salt book on the other. She worked for a day and a half. Then she came and put 4 numbers in front of me. 1. Voss is offering Highmore 11,000 marks over 3 years against the match. 2. Highmore's shortfall this year is 9,000. So the money covers it once and then it stops, and Voss owns the county's heir and its granary and in 11 years its seat. 3. Duncairn's salt through Saltmouth last year cleared 4,100 marks, and Highmore is our factor on every barrel of it. That is not a windfall. That is a trade that has grown every year for 3 years. 4, and this is the one she circled. If Highmore took Duncairn's whole southern carriage as well, grain out, iron in, over 60 miles of good road they already own, the county clears the shortfall in 4 years. Without Voss, without Rilla, without selling a girl of 17 to a man she has met twice. Cassius said, "My father is not choosing Voss over you. He does not know there is a choice. Nobody has ever put the second column in front of him." I asked why she had not sent it to him already. She said because he would not believe it from her. He would read it as his daughter arguing for the place she lives. That is the trap, and it is a real one, so I want to be plain about it. Everything Cassia can say to her father is spoiled by the fact that she says it from Duncairn. Every number she produces looks like a woman defending her own choice. The more correct she is, the more it looks like pleading, because that is what it would be from almost anybody. And Voss knows that. The line in the 3rd letter is not an insult thrown in passing. It is the whole strategy. Make her residence here an embarrassment and everything she says stops counting. He has not attacked me since the autumn. Nothing about the guns. Nothing about the grants. Nothing about what 200 people saw on the wall. Osric thinks he is waiting for the crown to do it for him, and I think Osric is right. But he has spent 8 months quietly making sure that the one person in this kingdom who could argue for me in a southern hall has no standing left to do it with. That is better work than anything he tried in the first 3 years. I offered her the obvious thing because it was obvious. I said I would send the second column myself. Warden of the Ashmarch to Count Varen, Lord to Lord, with our books open and the carriage offered in writing. Nothing in it from her at all. She said no. Cassius said, "Then it is a lord making an offer to a lord whose daughter he is keeping. He will read the offer and hear the price." I said there is no price. Cassius said, "There is no price you intend. Read it as a frightened man with a ledger. I have been telling you for 3 years to read a thing as the man receiving it, and you are very good at that with everybody except when it is about me." I did not have an answer to that. We left it there for 4 days, and they were not comfortable days. On the 5th she came into the counting room in the evening after Osric had gone and put 3 things on the table. The 4 letters in order, Highmore's accounts open at the 4th month, and our salt book with the last 3 years of Saltmouth ruled off and totaled at the bottom in her own hand. Then she asked me for the barony's full figures, not the returns, the real ones. Revenue, debt, the 4,000 marks from Ravenmark and the schedule I had signed against it, the grants, the population, the levy, and what the assessment in the 8th month was likely to cost me at worst. I asked what she wanted them for. She said she was building something and she would rather build it properly than surprise me with it half-finished. So I got the books out and we started at the top of the 1st column and we were still at it when the candles went. She took 9 days over it. I knew roughly what it was by the 3rd. So did Osric, who was being asked for the marriage law of 3 separate jurisdictions and is not a stupid man. So did Myra, who is not stupid either and who stopped putting 2 chairs at the far ends of the counting room. I want that on the record. There is a version of this where I am the last man in Duncairn to work out what is happening in his own hall. That is not what happened. I knew. I did not raise it. I will explain why in a moment, and it is not a flattering reason. On the 9th evening she came in with a folder and put it down and sat. Cassius said, "I have an instrument. I would like you to read it as a lord, and then I would like you to read it again as yourself, and I would rather you did not mix the 2. It was 6 pages. I will give you the argument rather than the pages. The problem stated properly. Highmore has a 9,000 mark hole in one offer. The offer costs it a daughter now and the county in 11 years. Duncairn has coin, a growing trade and no political standing anywhere south of the March. The Ashmarch is about to be assessed by a crown officer who will find correctly that it is a barony behaving like a county. The instrument. A marriage between the House of Vale at Duncairn and the House of Varon at Highmoor. What Highmoor gets. The southern carriage in writing, all of Duncairn's grain, salt, and iron over their road at their tolls. 4,100 marks of salt trade last year secured by contract for 20 years. 2,000 marks against this year's relief. Entered as an advance on carriage, not as a gift, so no man in Highmoor can say the Count took charity. What Duncairn gets. A county between it and the south. A market, a road it does not have to own, and a father-in-law with 12,000 people who has a reason to speak for the Ashmarch in rooms I will never be admitted to. What Voss loses, everything. His 11,000 marks was never for Highmoor. It was for the door Highmoor stands in. Shut that door with a marriage and a signed carriage contract and his money buys nothing. He will not spend it. He has never once spent money on a thing that had stopped working. And Rilla is free. Kasha put that in its own line on its own page with nothing else on the page. Then the 5th page, which was about the crown and which is the one that made me sit back. A bachelor lord on the frontier with 900 men and no heir is not a subject. He is a situation. If he dies, 4 grants come loose. So does a levy. The chancery has to do the whole thing again from nothing. A married lord with a settled house is a line in a book. The crown does not particularly like him. It does not need to. It can file him. Kasha said, "You want a county from a man whose whole profession is putting things in the correct box. At present you are in no box at all. That is why he is coming." Osric agreed with that when I asked him later, and he did not enjoy agreeing. Now the reason I had not raised it myself, which she had not put in the folder because it was mine to say. In the 8th month a crown assessor arrives to weigh a man who is guilty of every charge that can be brought against him. The likeliest outcome is a price. A real one is attainder. The charter voided, the grants dispersed, the guns forfeit. Me a private man on the road with 60 tradesmen and a debt to Ravenmark. I was not going to ask a woman to attach her name to that 2 months before it was decided, not because she could not judge the risk, because if it went badly, her name would go down with mine, and I would be the reason. I would have asked in the good month and let her find out in the bad one. I said that. She had the answer ready, which tells you she had thought about it for longer than 9 days. Kasha said, "If you are attainted in the 8th month, what happens to me? I am the resident factor of a foreign county in a voided charter. My posting dies with your seal. I go home to a father who has already told me to come home, into a house Earl Voss has bought, and I am the daughter who was in Duncairn. There is no version of the 8th month where I am safe and you are not. I have been in the same boat for a year. You have simply not been letting me hold an oar." I asked the other question then, the one that mattered. I asked whether any of it would be true if the arithmetic came out the other way. If Highmoor did not need a road, if Voss had never offered a mark. She thought about it properly. She always does, and it is the thing about her I would keep over everything else. Kasha said, "I have been finding reasons to be in this town for 2 years, Aldric. The factorship was a reason. The salt was a reason. The coast was a reason. This is the first one that does not need me to pretend it is business. I have written it as business anyway. That is how I think, and you would not have believed me any other way." Then she said the rest of it, and I am going to set it down exactly, because it is hers and not mine. Kasha said, "I am not asking to be looked after. I have watched you build a town out of a dry valley with a chain, a staff, and a book. I have never once wanted to be somewhere else while it was happening. I would like to be married to you. I am asking. You may say no and I will burn the folder and we will work tomorrow." I said yes. I did not make a speech about it. I have thought since about whether I should have, and I do not think she wanted one. I said yes. Then I said it again in a way that was about her and not about a county. She put her hand flat on the table and let out a breath she had been holding since page 1. Then she laughed and said that she had prepared for a negotiation and I had ruined it. The terms took another 2 days because we are who we are. Her dowry is the carriage contract, and it is written as hers, not her father's to give and not mine to take. If the marriage ends, the contract goes with her. The salt factorship stays in her name. She keeps signing for Highmore in Duncairn, exactly as she has for 2 years, and no clause anywhere makes her position depend on being my wife. There is a schedule attached. It lists everything she brought to this town and everything she is owed for it, valued honestly. At the top of it sits 1,100 marks she took off Earl Voss in the autumn with the truth. And there is one clause I put in over her objection. If the assessment goes badly, the marriage does not proceed until the outcome is settled and she has seen it in writing. She said it was sentimental. I said it was and left it in. We told Osric on the 3rd morning. He read the 6 pages and the terms without a word, all the way through twice. Then he took his spectacles off, which is the only thing he does when he is moved. My lord, my lady, this is the best drafted instrument I have seen in 11 years, and I include the ones I drew myself. Your father will hear of it within a month. Count Varen will hear of it from you, in your own hand, before he hears it from anyone else, or the whole thing is worthless. So that is what we did. Kasia wrote to her father that afternoon. I wrote to him the same hour. Neither of us read the other's letter before they went. That was her rule, and it was the right one. Then Osric ruled a fresh sheet and wrote articles of marriage, Vale and Varen across the top of it. Then he asked me for the exact acreage of the Ashmarch under plough. Highmore is 19 days there and back if the rider does not stop to be polite. It took 22, and they were long ones. I am not good at waiting. I have got better at pretending, which is not the same thing. I put the 60 Ravenmark men on the north wall and went out with them every day. Gareth let me carry stone for 4 days. Then he told me I was making the masons nervous and should go and be a lord somewhere else. Varen's answer came on the 22nd day, and it was not a yes. It was not a no either. It was a question, and it was the right question, and it changed how I think about the man. He wrote that he could not refuse Earl Voss on a promise. That is the whole of it. Voss has 11,000 marks and a signed betrothal in principle. Suppose Varen walks away from that on the strength of a letter from a frontier baron, a baron who is about to be assessed by the crown. If the letter turns out to be worth nothing, Highmore has no money, no match and no carriage, and an earl with a grievance on its northern boundary. So he asked for the carriage contract executed. Sealed, witnessed, in force. Not agreed, done. And the first payment in coin in his hall before he would write one word to Blackmore. Kasia read it twice. She said her father had just done the bravest thing of his life and that I would probably not be able to see it. I asked her to explain. He has told you exactly what he needs. He has not haggled and he has not hedged. A cautious man's whole life is arranging never to be pinned to a number. He has put himself on one, in writing, where you can hold him to it. Osric hated it, and Osric was right to hate it. Here is what the Count was asking me to do, 5 weeks before a crown officer arrives to weigh everything I own. Execute a 20-year contract binding the whole of Duncairn's carriage to a foreign county. Send 2,000 marks in coin out of the barony, over the march, under escort. And do it before I know whether I will still hold a charter in the 9th month. If the assessment goes against me, every mark of that is gone. The contract dies with the seal that signed it. Highmore keeps the coin, because it was paid in good faith and no court would take it back. Osric said, 2,000 marks of your father's money, across the march, on the word of a man who has spent 20 years committing to nothing. I said yes. He said he wanted it written in the book that he had advised against it. I said write it. He wrote it. He was still right. But the other column matters too, and it is this. If I wait until after the assessment, the betrothal is signed in the meantime and Rilla Varen is married to Den Voss in the spring. There is no version of that I get back. Voss will have his door, and the Ashmarch will be a walled town with a market it cannot reach, whatever the Chancery decides about my guns. Some things have a date on them, and this one had a date on it. So we did it in 4 days. Osric drew the contract, and it is the best thing he has ever drafted because he was still cross about it. 20 years. All salt, grain, and iron over Highmoor's road at Highmoor's tolls fixed against the coast rate so neither of us can be squeezed later. A schedule for arbitration that does not involve either of our courts. And a clause that survives the voiding of my charter, so that whoever holds the Ashmarch after me is bound by it. That last clause was Cash's. It is the one that makes the whole document worth something, because it says to her father, "This is not a promise from Aldric Vale. This is a promise from Duncairn, and Duncairn will exist whatever happens to me in the 8th month." 2,000 marks went south with it in 11 small chests, on carts, with 40 men under Wat Hallow. Their orders were to travel in daylight, on the road, in the open, and to stop at every village and be seen doing it. Hugh asked why we were advertising. Because a quiet convoy can be taken by persons unknown. 11 chests that 400 people watch go past cannot be robbed by anybody who wants to still be an earl afterwards. Wat came back on the 19th day of the 7th month with the Count's seal on the executed copy. There was a letter for Cassia with it. She read it in the yard standing. Then she read it again walking. Then she folded it into her sleeve and did not show me. She told me what was in it that night, and I am not going to write it down because it was not written to me. I will write down the one part she wanted repeated. Her father asked her whether she was doing this for Highmoor. She had the answer ready before he asked it, because she is who she is. She wrote back that she was doing it because she wanted to. That Highmoor was getting the road either way. And that he was to stop looking for the trick because there was not one. Rilla's betrothal was broken on the 22nd of the 7th month. Varon did it in one line, which I am told is unusual for him. What came back from Blackmore was also one line, and I have it in front of me now because I have kept it. I withdraw nothing. I am content to wait for the 8th month. That is Earl Voss entire. No threat. No demand. Nothing a lawyer could look at. He did not withdraw the 11,000 marks. He has left it on the table, offered and unspent, in front of a count who has just refused it. So when the Chancery voids my charter, the money is still there. Highmoor can pick it up again without ever admitting it climbed down. He has not lost. He has paid nothing and arranged to be the only man still standing if the 8th month goes badly for me. Gareth said it was the coldest thing he had ever seen on a piece of paper. Cassia said it was the first time in 4 years that Voss had done something she genuinely admired. We were married on the 4th of the 8th month. Not in a hall and not with lords. There were no lords available, and I would not have invited them if there were. The chapel at Duncairn, which holds about 90 people, and about 400 stood outside it in the road in the sun. Myra put the ring together out of 2 rings. There was no time to have one made, and Cassia said she was not waiting on a goldsmith. Bram gave her away at her asking, and did not manage to say the words in the right order, and nobody minded. Afterwards Osric read the articles aloud in the yard, all 6 pages in his court voice. Halfway through I realized he was doing it deliberately. He wanted every person in Duncairn to hear that the carriage was hers and the factorship was hers, and that none of it depended on me. Tam got drunk. Gareth did not because he was on the wall. Then on the 6th morning of the 8th month, Kessa's rider came in off the south road. A Chancery party of 9 had crossed the Greywater at the toll bridge, traveling slowly. They would be at my gate before dark. They came in an hour before dark on the 6th. 9, as Kessa said, 3 clerks, 4 crowned men-at-arms in plain coats, no badges out, which is a courtesy and is meant to be read as one. A surveyor of about 30 with 2 chains and a level on a mule, and Corvin Ask. He is 62 now. Smaller than I remember. Gray, dry, wire spectacles, ink on the side of his right hand. He got off his horse without help and stood in my gate looking north up the main street for about half a minute before he said anything to anybody. I know what he was looking at. 2 years ago that street was mud and 11 houses. Ask said Warden. Aldric said Assessor. Ask said Baron. Now, my error, I wrote the report. And that was the whole of the greeting. The first thing he did was refuse my house. I had rooms made ready, good ones. He said no, thanked me properly, and asked whether the town had an inn. We do now. 2. He took 4 rooms at the better one and paid for them in front of the innkeeper at a rate he read out of a small book in his coat. The book is a chancery schedule of lodging. He carries it so that no lord anywhere can say afterwards that the assessor slept warm at the assessed man's expense. He would not take dinner in my hall either, not on the first night and not on any night after it. I understood the first refusal. I was still turning the second one over 3 days later. Gareth said it was insulting. Cassius said it was the opposite. He is protecting the report. Anything he eats here is a line somebody can write in a margin. He is not saying he dislikes you. He is saying that whatever he concludes about you is going to be worth something, and he means to keep it worth something. He came to the counting room at first light on the 7th with 2 clerks and set out the procedure. Standing, in about 4 minutes without notes. 30 days. He is not here to prosecute. There is no charge before him and he has no power to bring one. He is here to make a return to the Chancery describing what the Ashmarch is. The Chancery will decide what to do about it. He may go anywhere on my charter ground without asking. He will ask anyway as a courtesy, and if I refuse him a place he will write down that I refused and where. He may speak to any person on my ground, alone, without me or any man of mine present, and he will do that a great deal. He will not accept any document from me that is not also in the Chancery copy, unless I sign a note explaining why it exists, and I may be present at nothing except when he is asking me questions. Then he asked whether any of that was unacceptable to me. I said no. Most men say no, 2 have said yes. Both had a great deal to be found. There is one more thing he said in that first 4 minutes, and I have thought about it every day since. Ask said you are going to want to know what I think of you. You will want it badly by about the 9th day. I am not going to tell you, and it will not be because I am concealing it. I do not form a view until I have finished. If I form one on the 4th day, then everything I look at afterwards is evidence for it. That is not assessment. That is a man decorating an opinion. I have spent 4 years teaching myself the same discipline and doing it worse than he does. Now here is the part where he took the whole thing away from me in the first hour without raising his voice. I had prepared. Of course I had prepared. 6 weeks of Osric building the case and a plan for each charge in the order we expected them. We expected the guns first. Everybody expects the guns first. They are the illegal thing, they are the loud thing, and 200 people saw them work. He did not ask about the guns. He did not ask about the levy or the grants or Harrowgate or the 4,000 marks or the salt or anything a man would ask about. He asked for the register of the dead. I should explain what that is because it is the least impressive document in this barony. Last autumn I gave an order home. Every grant, every village, every year, deaths and departures written down by name where a name could be found. Not numbers, names. I said at the time it was the least useful thing I did all season. It saves nobody. It grows no grain. It is 4 clerks and a lot of paper recording people it is already too late for. I had it made because a thing nobody counts is a thing that can go on forever. 25 people walked west out of Harrowgate over 4 years, and no ledger in the empire had a line for them. Osric brought it in. 11 volumes because Harrowgate's back years took 6 on their own. Ask sat down with the first one, and opened it and read for a while with his finger on the column. Who ordered this? I said I did. Why? I gave him the honest answer, which is the one I gave Osric in the autumn, because a thing nobody counts can go on forever. He wrote that down. Word for word, I watched him do it. Then he asked whether the entries continued through the 3rd month of this year, which is the month of the battle, and I said they did. He turned to it and found the page and read it, and then he looked up at me for the first time since he had come through the gate. 19 names, your own dead from the 3rd month. I said yes. And the other column. That column is the ditch men. 14 of Torrens people, buried on our side of the wall, in ground we dug for them, with what we could find out about who they were. Which in 11 cases was nothing at all, so 11 lines read not known. He looked at that for a long time. Ask said there is no requirement anywhere in Crown law to record the enemy dead. There is no requirement to record your own, beyond the levy roll. I said I knew. Yes, that is why I asked for it first. He took all 11 volumes to the inn that night and read until the candles went, and one of his clerks told Myra in the morning that he had not come down for supper. Kasia asked me afterwards why that had rattled me, when it was the one document in the building that could not possibly hurt me. It rattled me because I have spent 4 years knowing what a man wants and putting true things in front of him until he arrives somewhere useful on his own. I did not know what Corvin Ask wanted. I still did not know on the 9th day. He had come 400 miles to assess a barony with 4 illegal guns in a shed, and he had opened with the one book in Duncairn that nobody made me write and nobody but me would ever read. Osric took his spectacles off that night and said the thing neither of us wanted to say out loud. My lord, he is not looking for what you did. He is looking for what you are. The next morning Ask asked for a horse, a guide who was not one of my officers, and the road to Harrowgate. He took a carter as his guide, a man called Fell who hauls salt 3 days a week and has never been inside my hall. That was deliberate and it was correct. Any officer of mine would have shown him the good ditch first. He was gone 6 days. I was not invited and I did not ask. Those were the worst 6 days of the month, not because I thought Harrowgate would lie for me, because I knew it would not. Harrowgate is 11 villages and 937 people, 3 days northwest of here. 2 years ago it was dying. The Grey had eaten 400 square miles around it. Earl Voss's returns had concealed that for a decade. Its lord, Gaunt Eimer, had been holding it together by a method I still cannot describe without stopping in the middle of the sentence. Every year he drew a lot, one name out of a barrel. That person walked west into the Grey and did not come back. The Grey took the offering and left the villages alone for another year. He believed it. He had 6 years of evidence for it, and his evidence was not stupid. In his 4th year he put his own son's name in the barrel. He stood there and did not put his hand out. The Grey was never taking payment. It was following water. I found that with a chain, a staff, and drainage arithmetic. We cut 11 miles of ditch in 9 days and pushed the Grey 3.5 miles back off Harrowgate's boundary. Nobody has walked west since. 25 names are cut into the chapel wall at Elderhithe. Myra had that done. I did not order it and I would not have. Eimer is dead. He walked west himself. And Harrowgate did not become mine. It voted. Twice. The second time was in a quiet summer with an army nowhere near it. 11 villages out of 11 voted to stay in association under Ned Eimer's page held in common. Ask went to the chapel wall on the first afternoon before he spoke to anybody. Fell told Kessa that he read all 25 names in order with his hat off. Then he asked what they were. Fell told him. He did not say anything at all for a while afterwards. Then he went and found Sarah Dean. Sarah is 34. She was a tenant's widow in the 5th village, and Harrowgate chose her in the spring to speak for the 11. She is not clever the way Kasia is clever. She is something rarer, which is that she cannot be hurried. He talked to her alone for 4 hours on the first day and on 3 of the other 5. He also talked alone to a miller, 2 shepherds, both of Eimer's surviving clerks, and a boy of 14 who works the North Gauge, and to the mother of one of the 25. That is the one that made Gareth go quiet. He talked to Wren Alder for about 10 minutes and did not go back to him. Wren is my man. Ask had no use for my men. Sarah told me most of it afterwards without being asked, which she did not have to do. He asked her whether the association was voluntary. She said the vote was in the chapel, in writing. The second one was in a quiet summer, and 11 of 11 voted to stay. And there is a clause letting them leave in the 5th month of any year without penalty. He said he had read the instruments. He had them with him. He wanted to know something the instruments could not tell him. Ask said if you walked out in the 5th month, what would happen to you? She said the ditch would still run. It runs downhill and it does not ask who owns it. The gauges would still be read because we taught 2 of theirs to read them. The school would stay because it is in their chapel and it is their own people teaching in it. Ask said so he would lose 900 people, and you would lose nothing. She said that was about right, and that it was the reason nobody had gone. He wrote that down and asked her to say it again slowly so he could get it exact. The hard question came on the fourth day, and she told me that one twice, because she wanted me to hear it right. Do you understand that in law your villages have no standing? The instrument you have signed does not exist. There is no such thing as land held in common by 11 villages under a dead man's page. I could write one line in my return, and every acre of it goes to the nearest lord who asks. Sarah said she understood that. She said she had understood it since the spring because the warden had told her himself in front of the 11 before the second vote. That is true. I did. It was the single most difficult afternoon of last year. Ask said he told you the thing that would have stopped you signing. She said he told them the thing they needed to know to sign it properly. Ask apparently sat with that for a while. Then he asked the last question. Then why did you sign it? And Sarah Dean said, because Eimer solved the wrong problem and the warden solved the right one. And because we are not going to be told by a man in a chair 400 miles away that the thing we voted for twice does not exist. Ask wrote it down and read it back to her and asked whether that was what she meant. She said take out beautifully. He came back on the 12th day of the month. He asked me one question about Harrowgate in my counting room with a clerk writing. You could have annexed it. 937 starving people, no lord and a dead man's unenforceable page. You could have taken it and no court in this kingdom would have looked twice. Why did you not? I gave him the true answer, which is not the flattering one. 3 parts. The first is that an annexed Harrowgate is 900 people who are mine because I said so. An associated Harrowgate is 900 people who are here because they voted twice and can leave in the 5th month. The second sort works when I am not standing in the room, and the first sort does not. The second is that I did not want to be a man who takes ground. I have watched 4 wardens do it, and they all start by taking one thing that nobody will miss. And the third is the one I nearly did not say and did. If I annex it, the instrument that let me do it sits in the book with my seal on it. And in 3 years somebody worse than me holds this charter. He wrote all 3 down. Then he took his spectacles off, which I had not seen him do. Ask said, Warden, the third reason is the one that will cost you. I asked him what he meant. He put the spectacles back on and did not answer. I have not stopped chewing on it since. That night I worked out what Osric had already worked out, which is why he had been quiet for 2 days. Every honest answer I have given this man has made me larger. A lord who grabs land is a nuisance. The Chancery has forms for a nuisance. But 900 people understood the risk and voted for him twice, with an exit clause in their hand. A lord who is offered ground like that is not a nuisance. He is a precedent. And a precedent that cannot be filed is exactly the thing an assessor cannot leave lying about on a frontier. On the 13th morning Ask came into the yard with both clerks and the surveyor. He asked me, quite pleasantly, whether the 4 unlicensed pieces in my shed were in working order, and whether I would be good enough to fire them for him. I had about 4 seconds to decide, and I want to set out what was in them. I could refuse. I am entitled to. He has no power to compel a demonstration, and he told me so himself on the 7th, but he would write down that I refused, and where, and on what day. And a chancery reading the Baron declined to show the pieces will imagine something worse than 4 bronze tubes in a shed. Every man who has ever read a report imagines worse. I could show him the guns cold. Let him look at them, measure them, and go away. Or I could give him the whole thing. I said yes, and then I said something I had not planned to say, which is that if he was going to see them, he should see them properly, and that would take until the afternoon. Osric made a noise. Ask noticed the noise, wrote nothing, and said the afternoon would do very well. Here is the reasoning, because it was not bravado. The guns are the charge I am guilty of and cannot get out of. 4 bored bronze pieces, cast in my forge by my smith, without a license, because there is no license to be had. That is settled and no amount of theater changes it. But I had spent 6 weeks with Osric learning something about my own position, and it is this. The guns are not the dangerous thing about the Ashmarch. They are the visible thing. If Corvin Ask goes home believing that Duncairn is a place with 4 illegal guns, then his return says a frontier baron has ordnance, and the Chancery does what Chanceries do with ordnance. It licenses it, fines it, or takes it. If he goes home understanding what actually happened on that glacis, the return says something much larger and much harder to file. I decided I would rather he understood. That is not honesty for its own sake. It is that I have never once beaten a man by leaving him with a small wrong picture, and I was not going to start with this one. We did it on the old range south of the wall, where 460 measured shots were fired over 11 months. Call brought 2 pieces up, not 4. 2 is enough and 4 is showing off. I did not lay them. I did not touch them. Rowe did. Ailed is 20. He was a shepherd's boy from the beads 3 years ago, and he cannot read anything except numbers, which he reads better than my clerks do. He has the range tables by heart. He has had them by heart since 9 days after Watt first read them to him. Ask's surveyor set a marker where Ask told him, a good deal further out than the surveyor expected. He paced it with his own chain because Ask would not take our distance. 840 paces. Their measurement, their chain, their number. Ailed looked at it for a moment. Then he said the elevation out loud and the charge and what he expected the first ball to do. One of the clerks wrote all of it down before the gun was loaded. That was Ask's instruction, and it was a good one. First ball landed 30 paces long and 11 right. Ailed said something to Watt about the ground being drier than the book, adjusted, and put the second one 12 paces from the marker. The third one hit it. Nobody cheered. I had told them not to. They stood there like men doing a morning's work, which is what it was. Ask watched all 3 from beside the gun, close enough to feel it, which most men will not do the second time. Then he walked out the 840 paces himself, at 62, in the heat. His clerks went with him, and the surveyor measured the fall of each shot and wrote it down. He was gone the better part of an hour. When he came back, he did not ask me anything. He went to Call. He asked who cast them. Call said he did. He asked where Call learned. Call said nowhere. He is a village smith, and he had made a cart axle the week before. The warden brought him a drawing and a number for the wall thickness, and he ruined 9 before he got one. He asked whether Call could make more. Call said yes. 6 a year if he had the bronze. And then, because Call has never in his life left a true thing unsaid, he added that the guns were the easy part. Ask asked what the hard part was. Call pointed at Ailed and said, that. So Ask took Ailed Rowe away and talked to him alone for 2 hours, and I did not hear it, and Ailed came back and told me all of it anyway at some length because he was pleased with himself and had every right to be. Ask asked him how he knew where to put the ball. Ailed said it is in the book. Ask asked him to explain the book. Ailed explained the book. 460 shots, each one written down. Charge, elevation, ball weight, wind, wet or dry ground, and where it landed. Then he said the thing that I think decided the whole month. He said the book is not clever. He said anybody could have made it. It just takes 11 months and somebody who does not get bored. Then Ask asked him how long it took him to learn it. 9 days. Ask asked him how long it would take him to teach it to somebody else. And Ailed said about 9 days, probably, unless they were slow. I want to be plain about what was in that room, because it is the most dangerous thing in the Ashmarch, and it is not in the shed. For 1100 years, the deciding factor on a battlefield in this world has been a man with an aura. It takes decades. Gareth's father was a flame, and it took him 40 years and killed him at 51. You cannot buy it, you cannot teach it, and it runs in about 9 families. That arrangement is what every noble house in Valdren is built on, not the land. The land is downstream of it. On that range, a shepherd's boy who cannot read words put a ball on a marker 840 paces out, 3 shots in front of a crown officer off a book he learned in 9 days. There is no aura in it anywhere. There is no blood in it. There is no name in it. It is paper and paper copies. Ask is not a soldier, and he is not a fool. He worked that out standing in a hot field with a chain in his hand, and I watched him work it out, and neither of us said a word about it. At the end of the day, he asked me for a copy of the range tables. Osric came about 2 inches out of his chair, because handing over the tables is not like handing over a gun. A gun is one gun. The tables are the method. Once they are in the chancery, they are in the empire, and I never get them back, and in 10 years somebody points them at somebody. I asked Ask what he intended to do with them. Attach them to my return, sealed. They will be read by the 4 men who read the return. I asked what happens if I refuse. Then I described them from memory, in my own words, having watched a boy of 20 use them. My description will be worse than the document, and it will frighten people more. That is not a threat, Baron. It is simply what will happen. He was right, and there was no clever way round it, and I have not had a straight loss like that in a long time. I gave him the tables. He read every page before he sealed them, which took him until well after dark. Then he sealed the packet with his own hand and entered it in his list as one item. He wrote a line beside it. I asked him to read it back to me, and he did without hesitating. Supplied by the Baron, unasked, on the 13th day. He came to the men on the 15th day, and this was the charge that could take everything. Let me put the problem in one line. My charter allows me a levy for the defense of my own ground. What I have is not a levy. A levy is farmers. You call them in a bad season, you give them a spear, they stand in a field, and you send them home for the harvest. Nobody trains them, because a trained farmer is an expensive farmer. What I have is 920 men. 280 standing, paid all year. 640 who drill 11 days a month and can load a matchlock in 11 counts on the 4th wet day. The law has no word for that on a baron's ground. The nearest word it does have is retinue, and a retinue of that size belongs to a duke. Osric had put the question to me in the 6th week, and I could not answer it. Ask put it to the men. He did it properly, which is to say he did it in a way I could not object to. He watched a full drill on the 16th, not a parade. Gareth ran the ordinary morning because I had told him to change nothing in the 4th month, and he had not. Then Ask asked for 20 men chosen by him off the roll alone, one at a time, with a clerk. He picked them himself, and he picked well. 4 of the standing companies, 9 of the drilled, 2 boys of 17, 3 men over 40, 1 who had been fined twice, and Sim Barrow, who came to us out of Blackmore and used to be Voss's. He asked each of them the same 6 questions. I know this because half of them told me afterwards, and none of them had been told not to. Who pays you? Who feeds you? Who do you obey? What happens if you go home? Where were you in the 3rd month? And then the last one. If the crown calls this levy tomorrow to march 400 miles, against a man the crown names, do you go? Nobody lied to him. I want that understood. I had given no instruction about what to say, and Gareth had given none either. I checked, because I am not above suspecting myself. They told him the truth, which was worse than a lie would have been. Sim Barrow said he would go if the Baron sent him. A drilled man from Coombe said the same thing in fewer words. One of the 17-year-olds said he did not know and would have to ask his sergeant. Ask apparently wrote that down with some care. And Ord Castle, a standing man of about 40 who I have known 3 years, said he would want to know what it was for. He said that if it was for a lord 400 miles away who had never sent us a cart or a man or a coin in 11 years, he did not see why he would walk that far to do it. Then he added, because he was being honest and did not think it through, that he would go anyway if the Baron said go. 19 of the 20 came out in the same place. They answered to me, that is not a levy. Everyone in Duncairn knew it. It had simply never been written down by a man with a chancery seal before. Gareth's account that night was the shortest sentence he has ever given me. They told him the truth, and the truth is that they are mine and I am yours. I asked whether he could have got a different answer out of them, with a week to prepare. Gareth said yes, and he would have known inside 2 men. Then everything else in his book would be a lie as well. Which is exactly right, and is why I did not try it. I sat up that night with Osric and Kasia, and we went round it 4 times. There are 3 ways out of this, and 2 of them are bad. 1. Argue the word. Claim that 920 men on a frontier charter is a levy because the frontier is different. It is not a stupid argument. It is the argument every warden would make. And it loses because Ask has 20 statements in his bag saying I answer to the Baron, and no amount of Osric's Latin gets round 20 men. 2. Cut it. Stand the 640 down. Send them back to the fields, keep 100 and go into the chancery as a small obedient baron with a modest guard. Kasha killed that one in 9 words. Toran is alive. He is fed, he has 9,000 men, and he now knows exactly what Duncairn is worth. Standing the drill down to please a clerk would be the stupidest thing anybody on this frontier has ever done, and it would kill people in about 18 months. 3. Name the price before they do. Here is what I mean, and it took most of the night to see it. The Crown is going to attach a condition to that levy. It has to. No chancery in the world reads 20 statements like that and writes no action. If I do nothing, 4 men in a room 400 miles away decide what the condition is. In my absence. Off a document, with Earl Voss's 14 years of letters in the same building. If I write the condition myself, they get to accept it or improve it, and men in rooms overwhelmingly accept. So on the 18th day I did the thing Gareth has still not entirely forgiven me for. I called the whole levy in. Standing and drilled, 906 men present out of 920 in the field below the north wall, with the town watching from the bank. You cannot hide 900 men. And I asked Corvin to come and stand where he could hear. I told them the truth first, because they had earned it, and because Ask was standing there. I told them a Crown officer had asked 20 of them whether they would march if the Crown called. That 19 had said they would go if I sent them, that the answer was honest, and I was not angry about it. Then I told them it was the answer that could cost us everything. A lord with 900 men who answer only to him is not a baron in the Crown's book. He is a problem the Crown solves. Then I made the offer out loud, in front of 900 witnesses and a chancery clerk with a pen. The levy of the Ashmarch is answerable to the Crown of Valdrin on demand, for the defense of the realm on the same terms as any count's levy in the south. Not to me, to the Crown, with 2 conditions which I read out and which Osric had put in proper form that morning. 1. It is not to be taken off the frontier while there is a host east of the passes. If the Crown wants 900 men to march 400 miles in a year when Toran is moving, the Crown may come here and tell these men so itself. 2. It is a levy for the realm and not for a lord. It does not march against another lord's house on a private quarrel, whoever asks and whatever seal is on the paper. That second one is Earl Voss, and everybody in that field knew it was Earl Voss. Then I asked them if they would take it. I did not order it. That was Kasha's point, and she made it hard the night before. A levy ordered to accept the Crown is a levy that answers to me about answering to the Crown, and Ask would see straight through it and be right too. Wat Hallow asked the only question. He asked whether it meant a man could be sent somewhere I had not agreed to. I said yes. That is exactly what it means. He stood there and thought about it for a while in front of 900 people. Then he said all right. They took it by shout and it was not close. I have been in enough of those to know the difference between a shout that means yes and a shout that means the Lord is watching. It was a yes. Gareth did not shout. He told me afterwards that I had just given away the only thing on this frontier that had ever actually protected us, that he understood why, and that he still thought it might kill us. I said I knew. Ask stood through the whole of it about 30 yards off with his hands behind his back. He did not write anything while it was happening. One of his clerks told Myra that this was very unlike him. That evening he came to the counting room without an appointment, for the first and only time in 30 days, and asked one question. Did you do that because it was right, or because you knew I would recommend it anyway? I said both, and that I would not insult him by pretending otherwise. He nodded once, said good night, and went back to the inn. Osric watched the door close. Then he said that in 11 years of drafting he had never seen a man give away a private army and come out of the room heavier than he went in. He left it until the 21st day. I had known it was coming since the 6th. So had he. Neither of us mentioned it for 3 weeks, which is its own kind of conversation. By then he had statements from 41 people who were on that wall or under it in the 3rd month. He read me the summary himself. He did not have to. I think he wanted me to hear what it sounded like from outside. 11 people said there was a light. 6 said silver, 3 said white, 1 said it had no color and he could not explain that and did not like being asked. 9 said the blight forms came apart rather than fell down. 4 said they broke like ice. 2 said they simply stopped being there. 4 men swore I was on the west stair. 3 swore I was on the parapet at the same moment. 1 woman who asked rated highly, and I would too, said she looked away because it hurt to look at and she was not going to pretend otherwise to a man with a pen. And 31 of the 41 said some version of the same last thing, that the gray went backwards. No 2 of these agree on what they saw. All 41 agree on what happened afterwards. In my trade, that is the signature of a true event badly witnessed, not of a rumor. Then he put the papers down and told me what his actual problem was, and it was not the one I expected. Ask said there is no law about this. Do you understand how unusual that is? There is a law about your guns. There is a law about your levy. There is bad law about your grants, but there is law. There is nothing at all about you. I have to write something on that line. If I write nothing, 4 men in a room will decide what it means that I wrote nothing. That is the sentence that made me realize he was not hunting me. He was being handed the same knife I was. So I told him, not everything. I will come to the part I did not tell him, and I did not sneak past it. I told him I have an aura, that it is at the rank called flame, that I have had it 4 years and that it started at nothing, which anybody in Ravenmark who knew me as a boy will confirm, and several of them will enjoy confirming. I told him what it does, which is the part that matters and the part nobody had said to him plainly. It is not a weapon against men. I have never used it on a man, and it would be a poor way to fight one. It unmakes blight matter. It takes a gray form apart the way heat takes ice apart. It is a counter, and it appears to be a counter to one specific thing. I told him what it costs. The first time I used it properly, it put me flat on my back for 2 days with my arm dead and my bones cold. Now it costs me an afternoon. It has never once been free. And I told him the thing I use it for 9 days in 10, which is not fighting at all. I read water with it, 20 or 30 times a day, for nothing, standing at a ford looking like a man checking a ford. That is how I found the gray in the Motherwell at Cold Fell before it reached the town, and it is how 11 miles of ditch got put in the one place it would work. Ask stopped me there, and made me say that part again while the clerk caught up. You are telling me the Ashmarch's water was surveyed by a man who can see it? I said yes. Then the survey is not repeatable by anybody else. I said the finding is not. The ditch is. Saradine's people read the gauges now, and they do it with a stick and a chalk mark and no gift of any kind, and a man in Highmore could do the same tomorrow with a chain and a staff. He wrote that down and underlined something, and I would give a good deal to know what. Then he asked the question, and he asked it in the exact form that gave me nowhere to stand. Can it be given to another man? Not how did you get it, not is it inherited. He had thought about the wording probably for 3 weeks, and he asked the only version that cannot be answered sideways. I have never wanted to lie to somebody so much in my life. The lie was right there, and it was a good one. Nobody knows. It is a gift, and gifts are not given. Every man in Valdren believes that. He would have written it down and gone home. I did not do it, and I want to be honest about why, because it was not virtue. It was that he would have found out. Not this year. In 4 years or 7, when something happens somewhere else and somebody puts 2 pages side by side. And on that day, the whole of my 30 days becomes worthless, and every true thing in his book gets read again as a lie that had not been caught yet. So I told him I would not answer that question. He put his pen down. Both clerks stopped. Ask said, "You understand that a refusal is an answer?" I said I did. If it could not be given, the answer would be no, and the answer would cost you nothing. I said that was correct, and that I was still not going to answer it. He asked me why not. That one I could answer. I said that whatever the truth of it is, the moment it is written on a page in a chancery it stops being mine, and starts being something men make plans about, and that I have watched what men on this frontier do with an advantage, and I would rather carry the suspicion than hand over the certainty. Ask said that is very close to admitting it. I said it was, and that he should write down that I said so. He looked at me for a while. Then he did something I did not expect. He asked me to write it myself. So I wrote it. One paragraph in my own hand, and I will set it down here exactly, because it is going to matter later, and I would rather the record was mine. I decline to answer the question whether my aura may be given to another man. I decline knowingly, and I do not claim ignorance. I have answered every other question put to me in 30 days truthfully and completely. Aldric Vale, Baron of the Ashmarch, the 21st day of the 8th month. He read it, sealed it separately from everything else, and entered it in the list on its own line. Then he said the only thing he said in 30 days that was not procedure. Ask said, I have taken 400 statements in my life. That is the first refusal I have believed. There was one more question, and I did not see it coming at all. Ask said, is the gray retreating everywhere, or only here? Only here. Kessa has 3 years of reports, and the line only moves where we have moved water. Everywhere else on the frontier it is where it was, or it is further forward. Ask said, so it is not going away, it is going somewhere else. I said yes, and that 11 miles of my ditch discharges into the Elder Brook, and the Elder Brook runs toward Kelmere, and Kelmere is already 200 deaths down, and Osric found that out in a fortnight last autumn and put it on my desk without a word. He asked whether I had told anybody. I said I told Idris Hale in the 7th month, in writing, with the arithmetic, and that Hale has a village on his eastern edge with no ditch, and now knows exactly what saving it will cost the ground below him. And the other 5 wardens. I said no, and that I had no good answer for that and had been avoiding it for a year. He wrote that down too, and he did not soften it, and he was right not to. Kasha found me in the yard afterwards and asked how it had gone. I said I had told a crown officer what I am, refused him one question in writing, and confessed to poisoning a neighbor's water, all in the same afternoon. She thought about that for a moment. Then he now has a document in which you decline to answer, signed and dated in your own hand. Aldric, that is not a wound, that is offense. Every man who comes at you over this for the rest of your life has to get past a piece of paper where you said plainly that you would not say. They cannot claim you hid it. You published the hiding. I had not seen it that way, and I am still not sure she is right. What I do know is that Corvin Ask went back to the inn that night, and did not come out the next day at all, and one of his clerks was seen carrying 2 fresh quires of paper in at noon. On the 23rd morning, he sent word that he wanted 3 days at Kelmere, and would be taking the surveyor and no guide from Duncairn at all. Ask went to Kelmere on the 23rd and took his own guide, and that left me 3 days with nothing to sign. I went up to Cold Fell with Bram. Cold Fell is the Motherwell, 91 feet down at the head of the whole system, 3 days' walk northwest of the town. Everything Duncairn drinks starts in that shaft. If it is wrong, we are all wrong 9 days later. Bram has been up there twice a year since we cut it. He was not going to manage it this year, and both of us knew it, and neither of us had said so. He is somewhere past 70. He has a hip that has been failing for 2 years. He got up the fell on a pony and got off it badly. At the collar he looked down the ladder for a while. Then he said he would sit at the top, and I could tell him what it looked like. That is the first time in 4 years Bram has not gone down a hole he wanted to see. I should say what Bram is, because he is not a servant and he is not an advisor, and I have never found the word. When I got here I had a valley with 1 bad spring and 1,100 people. Bram was the old man who knew where water had been, not where it is. Where it had been, 40 years ago, before the Grey, when he was a boy and his father dug wells. Everything I have built is standing on the inside of that head. I knew a tunnel like this was possible. I want to be precise about that because it matters, and I have never written it down properly. I knew such things existed. I knew roughly what shape they were and what they were for. I knew men had built them with hand tools and no engines. I did not know how to dig one. I could not hold a line underground. I could not read a fall by eye or tell rotten ground from sound by the noise a bar makes. I could not have cut 50 yards of it alone. Bram taught me all of that standing in a hole being rude about my work for 2 years. We sat at the collar most of the afternoon and did not talk much. He asked how it read. I told him clean all the way down, northwest face dry, no color in the seams. Then he said it, and he did not build up to it because he never has. Bram said I said once I wasn't asking. I've decided I am. I asked what he was asking. Bram said where you come from, not Ravenmark. You know what I mean and you've known for 2 years. So I told him, I'm not going to set down every word of it because a good deal of it came out badly and I had never said any of it aloud before in 4 years. But I told him the substance and I did not soften it. I told him I am not the boy who was born in Ravenmark. That boy was ill for a long time. Then he was not there and I was. I remember the day it happened from the inside, and I have no explanation for it that would satisfy either of us. I told him where I come from. A place with no gray and no lords and no auras. A place where every house in a town of 100,000 has clean water arriving under pressure all day. Nobody thinks about it. Nobody knows one name of the men who built it. I told him I was not important there. I was one of many thousands of men who understood water, and not the best of them. If I had died at my desk, it would have inconvenienced about 9 people, and I told him I did die. That part I did not go into, and he did not ask. Bram sat with that a long time. The thing about being old, he told me once, is that you stop finding things impossible and start finding them inconvenient. So none of it was yours. I said that was the question I have been asking myself for 4 years and that I have an answer now, and it took the whole 4 years to get. I said I brought one thing, the knowledge that it could be done, not how, that it was possible at all. In this world, a man who says he can bring water 11 miles under a hill is a liar or a madman. Everybody knows that. So nobody starts. I never had to be brave about it. I only had to be patient because I already knew the answer existed. Bram said, and the rest? The rest I learned here. Most of it from him in a hole being told I was doing it wrong. He thought about that for a while. Then he laughed, which I had not expected, and it turned into a cough that went on too long. Bram said, 40 years I've had men tell me it can't be done. Not one of them ever looked at the ground first. You turned up knowing it could. That's not a small thing to bring. That's the only thing anybody ever needs and nobody's got. Then he asked whether anyone else knew. I said Kasha knows most of it. Osric has worked out that there is something and has decided not to look at it. And now him. Bram said, keep it that way, not for your sake. I asked whose sake. Theirs. The lad row reads a book and puts a ball on a stone at 800 paces. If they find out the book fell out of the sky, they'll stop believing the book. And the book's the part that's worth anything. I've had that sentence in my head ever since. It is the best argument for silence anybody has ever given me, and it is not about me at all. Then he asked me for something which he has never once done. He wanted the water written down, all of it. Not the tunnel we dug, the method. How to look at a fell and know where the old water went. The noise a bar makes in a rotten seam. The color of the spoil. Why the boggy corner holds the deepest crust. How a spring line moves in a wet decade and comes back in a dry one. He said he had been going to teach it to his son. His son died in the 2nd year. He had been meaning to say something about that for a while and had not got round to it. Bram said, I'm not going down that ladder again. That's this year. Next year it'll be the pony. I'd rather it was in a book than in me. I said yes before he finished the sentence. We started that evening, at the collar with a wax tablet, and got through about 2 hours of it before the light went. Ilsa Marrow has him 3 mornings a week now, writing it as he says it, in his words and not mine. It is going to be a long book. Most of it will be wrong in 50 years, and some of it is wrong already. It is also the only copy anywhere of what one man learned about water in a country that forgot. We came down off the fell on the 25th. He rode ahead of me most of the way, which he does so that nobody has to watch how he sits. About 4 miles out he pulled up and pointed at a shallow fold in the ground I have ridden past perhaps 200 times. Bram said there, under that. There's water under that, and there always was. My father wouldn't dig it because the fall's wrong for a well. I read it because I can read it standing at the head of the fold looking like a man resting a horse. He was right. 9 or 10 feet down, a good seam running north. I told him. He nodded like a man being told the sun had come up. He said we would want a tunnel, not a well, that it would run the other way from how it looked, and that I should send Kessa out with a chain before the ground froze. Then he said we should get on because he wanted his supper. Ask came back from Kelmere that night. I did not see him. Kessa did from the gate. She said the party came in slowly, and the assessor did not go to the inn first. He went to the counting room alone. He asked Osric for 4 years of Kelmere returns and for our discharge figures on the Elder Brook. He sat with both until the small hours. So he had gone and looked at the 200 dead, and then come back and asked for my numbers on the water that is killing them. I did not sleep much that night, and I am not going to pretend it was about the assessment. The last session was on the 5th of the 9th month, and it lasted from first light until about 4 in the afternoon. Most of it was dull, and I am glad it was dull. He read back every statement I had given in 30 days in order and asked me to confirm or correct each one. There were 41 of them. I corrected 4, all small, all mine, a date I had wrong by a day, 2 figures I had rounded, and 1 place where I had said about 600 and the true number was 588. He wrote the corrections in and had me initial each. He seemed pleased about the 4. He said a man who confirms 41 statements without changing one has memorized them. Then he inventoried the bundle, 11 volumes of the register, copied by his clerks and returned to me. The 4 instruments of association, the muster rolls, the returns 4 years, the range tables sealed, my 1-paragraph refusal sealed separately, Kelmere's figures, the Elder Brook discharge, the articles of marriage which he asked for and which I had not thought he would, 61 items. He read the list aloud item by item and asked whether anything he held had been obtained by threat, promise, or payment. I said no. He asked whether anything had been withheld. I said yes, 1 thing, and it was on the list as item 59. Then he closed the book and did something that was not procedure at all. I said on the 7th day that I would not tell you what I think of you. I am not going to. But I have been assessing men for 22 years, and you are about to spend 11 weeks inventing outcomes in your head, and most of what you invent will be wrong. So I am going to tell you how the machine works instead. That is not my opinion. That is the furniture. I have thought since that this was the kindest thing anybody did for me all year, and it came from a man who would not eat in my hall. Here is what he said, near enough. The return goes to 4 men. It is read in full by 2 of them. It is summarized for the other 2, and the summary is written by a clerk who has never been north of the capital. They can do 4 things. Nothing, which is not really nothing. It means the file stays open and somebody comes again in 3 years with the same questions and a worse temper. A taint. Void the charter, disperse the grants, forfeit the pieces. This is what a chancery does when the answer is easy and the man is small. License and fine. Regularize what can be regularized, take money for the rest, leave the shape alone, or grant upward. Move the charter to a rank that fits what is actually there and attach conditions to it. Then he said the sentence I have repeated to about 9 people since. Ask said the chancery is not a court and it is not an enemy. It is a filing system with an army. It does not ask whether you deserve something. It asks what happens to the paperwork if it does nothing. I asked him 1 question. I had been saving it for 30 days. I asked what happened to the other man. The second one, who had said yes to the full terms on the first morning and who had a great deal to be found. Ask looked at me for a moment. He is dead, not by the crown's hand. He had a brother. I asked whether the return had been the cause. The return was true. What people do with a true thing is not something I have ever been able to control, and I stopped pretending I could about 11 years ago. It is the only part of this work I would give up if I could. That is the only time in 30 days I saw the man rather than the office. Then he told me to send a man south with him. Not an advocate, not a lord. A clerk who knows the books, who can be in the building when a question comes up, and who can answer it in an afternoon instead of in 11 weeks by rider. Ask said, half the disasters I have watched were not decided against a man. They were decided while nobody who knew the answer was in the corridor. So Osric went. I did not enjoy that, and neither did he. He has been here since the first month of the first year, sent by my father to write and tell him when I died, and he has run the quiet office for 2 years, and the counting room does not work without him. He picked his own replacement in a day and a half. Nesta Pell, who is 26, has been doing half of it for a year, and is faster than he is and worse at explaining why she is right. He took 2 clerks, the Duncairn copies of everything in Ask's bundle, and a letter of credit for 800 marks that Kasia insisted on and I had not thought of. He will be in a city for 3 months on a frontier baron's account. If he has to write home for money, he is the poor relation in every room he enters. The last thing I said to him was that if the answer went badly he was to stay south, take a chancery post, and not come back to a voided charter at 61 years old. He said he had already decided what he would do in that case, and that he was not going to discuss it with me, and got on his horse. They left on the 6th morning of the 9th month. 9 chancery riders, Osric, 2 clerks, and 11 mule loads of paper. Most of the town came out for it, which surprised me, and which I think surprised Ask more. He stopped at the gate and looked north up the main street the way he had on the first evening. 2 years ago there were 11 houses on this road. I said there were. I counted 306 last night. I have written it down. It is the only number in 61 items that nobody will argue with. Then he put his hat on and said the last thing he said to me for 11 weeks. Ask said, do not write to me. Do not send gifts, do not send corrections, and do not send anybody to explain anything. If you are lucky, the next letter you get from the Chancery will be very short. I asked whether a short letter was good. It is usually good. They are also short when they are very bad. I am afraid that is genuinely all the comfort available. And he rode south. I stood at the gate for a while after they had gone, which is the 2nd time this year I have done that and achieved nothing by it. Kasia came and stood with me and asked whether I thought it had gone well. I said I had no idea. That I had spent 30 days with a man I could not read, could not move, could not flatter, and could not lie to, and that I had answered every question honestly and refused exactly one, and that this was the first contest of my life where I had not been able to see the other man's ground at all. She said something then that I have been turning over ever since. Kasia said, you keep saying you could not move him. Aldric, he asked for the register of the dead on the 1st hour. He read 25 names on a wall with his hat off. He walked 840 paces in the heat at 62 because he would not take your chain. That is not a man who cannot be moved. That is a man who has spent 22 years being the only honest instrument in a rotten building, and has just spent 30 days somewhere that did not need him to be. I said that was not the same as a good return. Kasia said no, but you have been treating him as a wall to be got round, and he was never a wall. He was a witness. You have never in 4 years had one of those with a seal. That evening I went into the counting room, and Nesta Pell had already moved the chairs. She had the harvest returns on the table, the intake register beside them, and a list in her own hand of 11 things that had been waiting 30 days because everybody in this building had been standing very still in front of a crown officer. Number 1 on her list was the Eastern Reach. 2,040 people came up that road in the 6th month. They are still there, and it is the 9th month and the ground freezes in the 11th. She asked what I wanted to do about them. So we started at the top of the list, and I did not think about Corvin ask again for 4 days, which is the longest I managed all autumn. Here is what the wait actually consisted of, because it was not waiting. 2,040 people came up the Eastern Road in the 6th month. Burnt out, walked 400 miles, arrived with what they could carry. I could not open the gate in the 6th month, and I have set out why. Water, food, and law. 2,000 people arriving into a town of 3,500 all at once, in a season when I did not know whether I would hold a charter by the 9th month. So they were not turned away and they were not let in. They were put on ground 4 miles south, on the flat, with a water ration off the Connaught and a survey. The survey was Nesta's idea in the 7th month, and it is the reason any of this worked. Every household was written down, where they came from, how many, trades, whether they meant to go back east in the spring. 6 clerks, 4 weeks. 2,040 households recorded as people, not as a number. 1,190 said they would not go back, not this year and not ever. There is nothing to go back to, and they had seen it burn. So on the 8th of the 9th month I opened the intake. The whole autumn became one problem. Shelter for 1,190 people before the ground freezes in the 11th, which is 9 weeks, in a country where a turf wall cannot be cut once the frost is in it. We did it with the template method, which is the same trick as the ditch, and I will explain it once because it is the whole of how this town gets anything done. Nobody on that ground needed to understand building. We cut 240 numbered timber templates in Call's yard. Every wall, every roof pitch, and every door frame is one of 11 shapes. A man is handed a number and a marked pole and told where to stand. Then payment by the corrected yard. You are paid for work that passes the level check, not for work done. It sounds harsh, and it is the opposite. Nobody argues about quality with the man paying them. The board in the chapel says whether it passed, and the board is checked at night by somebody who did not build it. 11 weeks. 240 longhouses, turf on timber, 11 to a house. Ren Alder ran it, and Ren Alder is going to be running something much larger than that within 2 years. The other half of it was where the muck goes, and this is the part nobody ever puts in a story, and it is the part that decides who is alive in the 3rd month. 2,000 people on flat ground with no plan is a fever camp. That is not bad luck. It is arithmetic. People drink where they wash. They wash where they empty. In 11 weeks, a quarter of them are ill. So the rules were written before the first house went up, and they were 4, and they were not negotiable. 1. Every latrine at least 80 yards from any water and always downhill of it, never above. Water carries what you put in it, and it carries it downhill every time without exception. 2. Drawing water is separate from washing, and washing is separate from stock. 3 points, 3 places, marked with 3 colors of post. Children were taught the colors in the 1st week. Children enforce rules on adults better than sergeants do. 3. The whole camp is cut with open drains from the start before the houses. 12 inches deep, graded, running away to a sump below all of it. Standing water inside a camp is what kills people, and standing water is what you get by default. 4. Latrines dug deep, limed weekly, moved every 4th month. Old ones capped and marked, so nobody digs a well into one in 9 years' time. Nell Fenn had the whole of it. She had 300 people digging drains for 11 days, while everybody was cold and nobody had a roof. She was told she was mad about 400 times. The Eastern Reach lost 9 people to fever and flux over the winter, out of 2,040. The capital, over the same winter in a city that has stood for 600 years, lost somewhere near 4,000. That is not because we are cleverer. It is because somebody drew the drains before the houses. 2 other things happened in those 11 weeks, and both of them matter. The first was a man called Ivar who came in with a mule train in the 10th month, said he was a greywater trader and was not. Hugh had him in about 4 days. He asked 3 questions too many, and none of them were about prices. Kessa's people put a name to him inside a week. He is one of Torun's, and he is not the only one. There were two more that autumn on the northern road who we did not catch until later. Gareth wanted him hanged. It would have been lawful and it would have been ordinary. I sent him home instead, and I sent him home with the truth. I had Nesta write out a true count, population, men under arms, guns all four and their real reach, not an inflated one. The wall, its height and its length and its state of completion. The water. And the range table's existence, though not the tables. Then I had it read to him twice because he could not read, and I told him to carry it to Torun and say that Duncairn had given it to him. Gareth thought I had lost my mind and said so in front of Kasha, who took my side, which did not help. Here is the reasoning. Torun is not a fool, and he is not a raider anymore. He is running a nation of 40,000. This year he learned that they can be fed by moving. He will come west again. The only question is what he believes about this place when he decides. If he believes a rumor, he will discount it because every chief in history has discounted rumors about walls. Give him a true count openly and let him check it against what his own men saw in the 3rd month. Then he has to plan against the real thing. And the real thing is expensive enough that a careful man goes somewhere else. A lie deters nobody. A rumor deters nobody. Only a true number that a man can verify deters anybody. Kasha said it was the same trick I have used on everyone since Voss, and I said yes, except that this time it is not a trick, and she said that is what makes it work. The second thing was Torun himself, 400 miles east, and I only know this because it took until the spring to reach us. He did not celebrate the season for long. He put men on the trial ditches he had ordered in the summer. By the autumn there were 11 of them cut on his own ground, all wrong, all in the wrong places. The line is the hard part, and nobody had told him that. He bought grain instead of taking it twice from a greywater factor at an honest price. He had never done that before in his life. And he sent riders west, not warriors, traders and men who could count. When Ivar came home in the spring with a true return of Duncairn's strength, written out, given freely, Torun is said to have had it read aloud 3 times. Then he asked one question, and it came back to us eventually through 4 mouths, and I believe it anyway. He asked who taught the boy with the gun. The rest of the 11 weeks was harvest and paper. The harvest was the best in the barony's history, which is not a compliment to me. It is what happens when 4 grants stop keeping 1/3 of their ground fallow, and every field has water in the 8th month. We cleared enough to feed 5,700 people through to the spring with 11 weeks in hand. Kelmere had one of the worst on record. I sent them 400 bushels at the coast price with the carriage free, entered as a sale, so no man there has to be grateful. It does not undo the Elder Brook, and I am not pretending it does. Osric would have argued about the price. Nesta simply asked whether I wanted it entered as relief or as trade. I said trade. She wrote trade. And Kasha and I had 11 weeks in a house where nothing was on fire, which we had never had, not once in 2 years of working together. I am not going to write about that. I will say only this. I had assumed being married would mostly be an instrument because that is how it was drafted. I was comprehensively wrong. Myra has been unbearable about it since. The rider came in on the 19th of the 11th month in snow, 4 days ahead of the road being closed. Not a chancery rider. One of ours, a boy Osric had left at the Greywater crossing 11 weeks earlier with instructions to sit there and wait. He had ridden 3 days without much sleep, and he had one thing in his bag. A letter from Osric, sealed twice, and it was 3 lines long. It is decided. I am coming north with it myself and with 2 others. Do not believe anything you hear before I arrive. They came in on the 23rd of the 11th month in snow. On the last day the south road was open. Osric, 2 clerks, a chancery officer of about 35 I had never seen, and Corvin Ask, who had told me in the 9th month not to write to him, and who had then ridden 400 miles north in winter at 62 years of age. I met them at the gate. Osric got down off his horse, and he had not shaved in 3 days, and he had a leather case chained to his wrist. My lord, may we do this indoors and sitting down? I have been holding it for 19 days, and I would like to put it on a table. Before I set down what was in the case, I want to set down what Osric did in the capital. The outcome is his as much as mine, and he will not write it down himself. He was there 11 weeks. He was in the building for 9 of them, every day in a corridor on a bench with 2 clerks and a copy of every document in Ask's bundle. Nobody asked him to be there. Nobody could make him leave either. The corridor is public and he had a lawful interest. He did 3 things. The first was to be answerable. 11 times in 9 weeks somebody came out of a room with a question. What was the Ashmarch's tithe in the second year? How many of the 640 are householders? The exact wording of the cum instrument. Each time Osric answered that afternoon, out of the books with the page. He told me the 11th time was the one that mattered, and it was a clerk asking a small question about grain. Osric had the figure in 4 minutes. The clerk said, apparently to nobody in particular, that he had been waiting 5 months for an answer out of Blackmore, on a different matter entirely. The second was to correct one thing against us. In the 6th week he found an error in our own muster roll. 2 men counted twice. It made no difference to anything. He took it in himself, unasked, and had it entered as a correction to a sealed return. Osric said, it cost us 2 men on paper. It bought us the only thing worth having in that building, which is that, when the Ashmarch says a number, the number is the number. And the third was that he never once argued the case. Not in 9 weeks. He never said we were owed anything, never said the guns were justified, never asked anybody for anything at all. He said a man in a corridor asking for a favor is a man they have to decide about. A man in a corridor with the answers is a resource. Nobody in a chancery has ever thrown away a resource. Now, what happened inside the rooms as far as we can reconstruct it, which is further than we had any right to. The return went to 4 men. 2 read it in full, as Ask said. They split. One wanted the charter voided, not out of malice, out of tidiness. His argument was that everything in the return was true and the man was guilty of all of it, and that the chancery does not exist to reward a lord for being good at things he was not licensed to do. That is not a weak argument. If I had been in that room and the Ashmarch had been somebody else's, I might have made it. The other man asked one question that killed it. He asked what they were going to tell the capital. Here is what he meant, and it is the whole reason I am still holding a seal. This kingdom had the worst year in living memory. 11 villages burnt in Highmoor, 110 emptied in the Eastern Reach, somewhere between 800 and 1400 dead, and a crown host that reached the fighting 2 months after it ended. Bread in the capital went to 3 times its price and stayed there. 4,000 died in the city over the winter, and most of them died of being poor in a hungry year. And in the middle of all that, one place held. One lord beat a host, fed his people, took in 2,000 refugees off the eastern road and got them through a winter with 9 dead. If the crown's answer to that man is to take his charter away, the story is in every market in Valdren inside 2 months. It is a very short story. It goes, the only lord who won is the only lord who was punished. Osric said the second man put it more plainly than that. He said, we cannot afford to teach them that competence is a crime. Not this year. Not with the price of bread where it is. There is a second half to that argument, and it is colder, and I think it did more work. 6 other frontier wardens are watching this. Every one of them files a return. Every tax, every levy, every decision made in that building about a frontier nobody in it has ever seen. The whole machine runs on those returns being roughly honest. Aldric Vale wrote down his own guns. In his own returns, in his own hand, in the 3rd year under works. Nobody caught him. He volunteered the thing that convicts him. It did not occur to him to do otherwise. Void that charter, and every warden on that frontier learns the same lesson on the same day. Do not write down anything true. Then the returns become fiction and the chancery is blind. In 9 years there is another 400 square miles of dead ground, unknown to anybody, because a man like Voss was filing it as pasture. They have had that exact experience once already. Ask wrote that report too. Osric said, that is the real reason, my lord, not the bread. They will say the bread. But 4 men in that building spent 2 days looking at what would happen to their own paperwork. Their paperwork is the only thing they have. 2 other things weighed, and I am not going to pretend they did not. My father's letter was in the building. He did not plead for me. He confirmed in one line that the Warden of the Ashmarch is of his house. Void a duke's son's charter in the 1 year that son is the only good news in the kingdom, and you have picked a fight you did not need. And Earl Voss petitioned. Of course he did. In the 10th week, when he heard which way it was going, it went badly for him, and it went badly in a way I could not have arranged if I had spent 4 years on it. His petition asked the Chancery to consider the unlicensed ordnance held at Duncairn. The man reading it had Corvin Aske's report from 2 years ago in front of him. The one that found Earl Voss had concealed the death of 400 square miles of Crown land for a decade. Osric says one phrase came back out of that room. The Earl of Blackmore was not this year's most credible witness on the subject of things concealed from the Crown. He has still lost nothing. He has spent nothing. He is still sitting there with 11,000 marks and no move made. But he asked for something and did not get it, and that is the first time in 4 years. Osric put the case on the table and unlocked it and took out one document. Vellum, not paper. 4 seals, not one. He did not read it out. He turned it round and pushed it across to me. Then he sat back and took his spectacles off. I have known that man for years, and I could not read his face at all. Osric said, "They have not punished you, my lord." Then, before I had got past the first line, Osric said, "That is the good news, and I want you to have it before the rest. It is not the news." I read it 4 times before I understood it, and Kasia read it twice and understood it faster. I am going to set it out the way it is written, in order, because the order is the argument. The first part is the grant. The charter of the Ashmarch is raised from a barony to a county. Aldric Vale, Count of the Ashmarch, held of the crown of Valdrin. That is the thing I have been building toward for 4 years, and it took me about 11 seconds to get past it, which surprised me. Kasia said afterwards that this is normal and that nobody has ever cried over the first clause of a grant. The second part is the ground, and it is the part I did not expect at all. The 4 grants are confirmed. Harrowgate, Kelmere, Elderhithe, and Coombe in association under their own instruments with their exit clauses intact, and the Chancery gave it a name, association under warrant. Ground held by its own people, under its own instrument, associated to a county by written vote, terminable by the same. 9 clauses defining it, a form for the vote, a requirement that any association be recorded and the exit clause published in the chapel of every village in it. Osric watched me get to that page and said the thing he had been waiting 11 weeks to say. "They made a box, my lord. There was no box, so they built one. In 22 years Master Aske has never seen them do that for a living man. Which means that in 11 years, when some other lord on some other frontier is handed 900 people who have nowhere to go, there is a legal instrument he can use that is not conquest. I did not build that. Saradine built that, in a chapel, answering a small gray man's questions for 4 hours without once trying to be clever. The third part is the guns, licensed, after the fact, which the Chancery does not like doing and did anyway. A fine of 900 marks for casting without leave, which is almost exactly what the 4 pieces cost to make, and which I regard as fair. A license for 8 pieces, not 4. Every casting to be entered in the returns within the quarter, with the weight of metal and the name of the man who cast it. Call is going to be extremely pleased with himself, and I am not looking forward to it. The 4th part is the levy, and they took my own words. Answerable to the crown on demand for the defense of the realm. Both my conditions in, unaltered, not off the frontier while a host is east of the passes, and never against another lord's house on a private quarrel. They copied the second condition out of Osric's draft word for word, and then did something I did not ask for. They wrote it into the general form, so that it now applies to every levy raised under a frontier charter in Valdrin. Earl Voss cannot call a warden's levy against a neighbor anymore, nor can anybody else. That was not done for me. It was done because somebody read the clause and thought it was a good clause, and then the 5th part, which is the price. There are 3 items and they are numbered. 1. A resident officer of the crown at Duncairn, not a garrison. One man with 2 clerks at the Crown's expense, resident permanently. He sees every return before it is sealed. He may write his own report on anything at any time and send it south under his own seal, and I do not see it and cannot stop it. He cannot countermand me. He cannot command a single man of mine. He has no vote in my court and no authority over my law. He is an I. That is the whole of the job, and the instrument says so almost in those words. His name is Tobin Marsh. He is 36. He arrived on a horse in the snow with 2 boxes of books and asked within the first hour where he might buy his own bread. 2. The question reserved. 1 line on its own near the bottom. The matter of item 59 is reserved to the Crown. Item 59 is my refusal. The paragraph I wrote in my own hand on the 21st day of the 8th month, saying I would not answer whether this can be given to another man. They did not press it. They did not demand it. They reserved it, which means it is not closed, it is not forgotten, and somebody will ask again at a time of their choosing when they want something. Kasia read that line about 6 times. That is not a threat, and it is not a debt. It is a door they have left unlocked in their own house. 3. The wardenships. And this is the one that took me all night. I want to set this out properly because it is the whole shape of my next 5 years. There are 7 wardenships on this frontier. Mine is 1. The other 6 run north and south of me along 400 miles of the worst ground in the kingdom. The instrument places all 6 under the warrant of the Count of the Ashmarch. I am to be answerable to the Crown for the defense and good order of the whole frontier. Now, read that as a lord, and it is enormous. It is 400 miles. It is on paper the largest command anybody has held on this frontier in 90 years. Read it as a clerk, and it is something quite different, and the clerk is right. They did not give me the 6 wardenships. Auber still holds his. Dane holds his. Hale, Crane, Voice, and the Ormonts hold theirs. Their charters are untouched, their revenues are their own, their courts are their own. They did not give me any money, not 1 mark. Not for men, not for works, not for the 50 miles of road between me and the nearest of them. They did not give me the power to command them. I may require returns, I may inspect, I may report to the Chancery on any of them, and that is the whole of my authority over 6 men, 4 of whom are afraid of me. What they gave me is the blame. If the pass is open in 2 years and 11 villages burn in Auber's grant, it is not Auber who is answerable to the Crown for it. It is me. With no money, no command, and no men that are not my own. I said all of that out loud in the counting room at about 2 in the morning, and Ask was sitting there and let me get all the way to the end of it. Then he said one thing. Yes, that is what it is. Would you like to know why it is that, rather than something worse? I said yes. Because the alternative on the table was to give you the 6 outright. That took a moment to land. He explained it in about 4 sentences, and I have thought about very little else since. Giving me the 6 outright would have made the Ashmarch a marchduchy of 11,000 people and 900 men, 400 miles from the capital, held by a man nobody can categorize, with an army that had just been shown to work. Every house in the South would have read it as the Crown building a rival on the frontier, and it would have been right. So they gave me the responsibility and withheld the power, which is the oldest arrangement in government, and the one no chancery has ever had to be taught. Ask said, "You are now the man who is blamed if the frontier fails. You cannot order those 6 to do anything. You will therefore have to persuade them." And a man who has to persuade 6 neighbors for 5 years, with no soldiers and no coin, ends up either with 6 friends or with nothing at all. The Crown does not much mind which. It costs them nothing either way. Then he stood up and said it was late for a man of his age, and went back to the inn and left me holding 400 miles of frontier and a 900 mark fine. I did not sign it that night. I did not sign for 2 days. That was not hesitation about accepting. There is no version of this where I refuse. Refusing a grant from the Chancery is not a thing a man does twice. I wanted to understand what I was signing before I signed it. I had been wrong about it on the first night. Gareth's objection came first, and it was the obvious one. 920 men, 400 miles. You cannot hold that. Nobody could hold that with 5 times what we have. He is right. He is right in a way worth setting down because it is the whole reason this looks like a punishment. If the 6 wardenships are a military problem I have lost before I start. Duncairn to the southernmost warden is 9 days' march. There is one road and it is bad. If Auber's grant burns in the 4th month, I hear in the 5th and arrive in the 6th. What I find is ash, and a warden who will tell the chancery I did not come. 400 miles cannot be garrisoned by 900 men. It cannot be garrisoned by 9,000, so it is not a military problem. Treat it as one and I spend 5 years failing at it and the crown gets exactly what it paid for. Here is what it actually is. I got there on the 2nd night after looking at the wrong thing for a whole day. The frontier does not have a soldier problem. It has a water problem. Every one of those 6 wardenships is dying the same way, not from raids. From the gray, it takes a mile or 2 of ground a year. Nobody understands it, and every one of those men is losing to it slowly while telling the chancery it is a bad season. I know how to stop it, not with an aura, with a chain, a staff and drainage arithmetic. It is written down. Idris Hale has 9 pages of it in his hand right now. And here is the thing that has been sitting on my desk for a year, which I have been walking around. If all 6 of them dig, and they dig without a plan, they will kill each other. Water goes downhill. My 11 miles of ditch push the gray off Harrowgate and into the Elder Brook. The Elder Brook runs at Kelmere. Kelmere is 200 deaths down and did not know why. Now imagine 7 wardenships cutting drainage at once, over 400 miles. Each man solves his own ground and discharges onto the next. In 11 years, the whole frontier is men flushing the gray at each other. The last man on the line gets all of it, and the last man on the line is probably me. There is one way to prevent that. One survey, one plan, one authority deciding where the water goes for the whole length of the frontier, which is to say, somebody has to be answerable for the whole line. So I sat with the instrument on the 3rd morning and read the wardenship clause again and understood it properly for the first time. They gave me the blame because it was cheap. That is true, and Ask as Good as said so, but blame is not nothing. 6 men who owe me nothing will sit in a room and agree to one drainage plan across 400 miles, not out of goodwill, because the man who is answerable can write to the chancery about them. I cannot order them. I do not need to. I need them to dig in the right place. Every one of them wants to dig, and not one of them knows where. I have the one thing on this frontier that any of them actually needs. It is not soldiers and it is not money. It is the line. Kasia took the other side of it for 2 hours, hard, and she was not playing at it. This is how they spend you. Not with a trial, with work. You will give 5 years to 6 men's ground and their harvests and their ditches. At the end of it, the Ashmarch will be as it is now, and you will be tired. And there is a worse version. You do it well. The frontier holds. Then somebody at court looks at a man who is popular from the passes to the coast, holding a warrant over 400 miles, and decides that is a different problem entirely. I said both of those were true. She said she knew they were true. She was going to say them once anyway, out loud, so neither of us could pretend afterwards that nobody had. Then she asked what I was going to do. I said I was going to sign it. The alternative is 7 men digging blind at each other for 11 years, and I am the only person alive who knows that. Kasia said, yes, sign it. I wanted you to sign it knowing what it costs and not because it had a coronet on it. I signed on the 26th of the 11th month. I did it in the counting room with Osric, Kasia, Gareth, Nestapel, and Tobin Marsh present. I asked Marsh to witness it on his first full day before he had unpacked his 2nd box. He asked, quite carefully, whether I understood that his witnessing it was not an approval of anything. I said I did, and that I was not asking him to approve of anything. He is going to be living in this town for a long time. He might as well start by watching me sign something in front of everybody, rather than hearing about it afterwards. He thought about that and then wrote his name under mine in a very small, very neat hand. He has been here since. He eats at the inn, pays for it, and asks about 11 questions a day, all of them reasonable. He has already found 2 errors in our returns and reported both south under his own seal. Then he told me he had done it, which he was not required to do. I have decided I am going to like him and that this is probably a mistake. Ask went south on the 28th, before the road shut properly, which meant a hard ride. I asked him why he had come north at all. He could have sent the instrument with Osric and stayed warm. 2 reasons. The first is that a grant of this kind is read to a man by an officer of the Chancery, and I was not going to have a boy of 24 do it badly in a yard. I asked what the second was. This was my last assessment. I am done in the spring, 22 years. I did not know what to say to that, and said so. Ask said there is nothing to say. I wanted to finish on one I could not file, and I got one. That is a better end than most men in my trade get. Then he asked me for something which he had not done in 30 days and 1 visit. He asked to be told when Bram's book was finished, and whether a copy might be sent to him, not to the Chancery, to him at his house in the south, where he says he intends to grow pears badly. I said yes. Good, I have spent 22 years reading what men wrote down about their own land. That will be the first one written by somebody who actually knew it. And he got on his horse and rode south into the snow at 62, and I have not seen him since. I started the letters that afternoon. 6 of them, 1 to each warden. Not orders, I have no orders to give. An offer and the same offer to each. A survey of his ground at my cost by my people, with the results his to keep whatever he decides afterwards. And the honest sentence in every one of them which Osric fought me on and lost. If he digs on the line I give him, the gray comes off his ground and goes onto somebody else's. I will tell him whose by name before he puts a spade in. The first went to Idris Hale. It was the shortest of the 6. I had already told him all of it in the 7th month, and he had not burnt it. It came on the last night of the year, while I was doing the annual returns, which is when it always comes. Population, 5,681, plus 2040 under arms, 920 levy answerable to the Crown grants in association. 4 under warrant form established Eastern Reach settlement. 240 houses, 9 dead of fever ordinance. Licensed 8 pieces, fine paid. 900 marks charter, county warrant, 7 wardenships, 400 miles Crown officer resident. 1 item 59, reserved. I read it through twice. Then I went and got Kasha. There was 1 line in it I had not seen in 4 years of these, not the county, not the 400 miles. Item 59, reserved. Everything else in that panel is a thing I did. That line is a thing somebody else is holding. Here is the year, then, in the plainest terms I can put it. In the 3rd month, a host of 11,000 came west. 2,000 of them turned aside to us. We broke them on a slope in an afternoon, and 19 of my people died. In the 4th month, a letter came with a crown on the wax. Between then and the 8th, I read my own honest paperwork as a stranger would. I found a complete case against myself in it, written in my own hand. In the 8th month, a small gray man of 62 spent 30 days finding out what I am. I answered every question but one. I wrote the refusal out myself, so nobody could say I had hidden it. In the 11th month, they made me a count. They licensed my guns and fined me 900 marks. They put an eye in my town. They invented a form of tenure for 900 people who voted twice, and they handed me 400 miles of frontier with no money and no command. They did not punish me, they priced me, and I set the price myself in a field in front of 900 men before they could set it for me. I have thought about that a great deal. I still cannot tell whether I was clever or whether I was managed. Probably both. The 2 are not exclusive, and I should have learned that by now. The rest of the ledger briefly, because a year is not only its argument. The kingdom lost 110 villages, near 1,400 people in the east, and 4,000 more in the capital over a hungry winter. That is the year everybody else had. Duncairn's harvest was the best in its history, and I would like it on the record that this was drainage and not virtue. 2,040 people came up the eastern road, and 1,190 of them are never going home. They are in 240 houses on the flat, 4 miles south. 9 of them died of fever. Nelfen cut the drains before anybody had a roof and was told she was mad 400 times. Highmore is out of Earl Voss's hand and has our carriage for 20 years. Rilla Varen is 17, unbetrothed, and by all accounts insufferable about it. Ravenmark is owed 4,000 marks and 11 tons of iron at coast prices, on a schedule, first payment due in the spring. My father has not acknowledged the schedule. Osric thinks he never will, and that this is his way of refusing repayment without saying so. Earl Voss has spent nothing and lost nothing. He asked the crown for one thing and did not get it. He is still at Blackmore with 11,000 marks and no move made. I would be a great deal happier if he had done something stupid. Bram is on his 41st page. Ilsa has him 3 mornings a week. He complains about it constantly and has not missed one. Toran is 400 miles east with a fed nation and 11 ditches cut in the wrong places. He also has a true count of my strength, which I sent him myself. He has asked one question about us, and it was not about the wall or the guns. He asked who taught the boy. I did the register last, as I do, 19 of ours from the 3rd month. 14 of theirs, 11 still not known. 9 from the eastern reach over the winter, 6 of them children under 4. That is what a winter does even when you have done everything right. Asked for that book in the first hour of 30 days, and I did not understand why at the time. I think I do now. Everything else I own describes what I built. That book is the only thing in the county that describes what it cost. He wanted to know whether I had bothered to write it down before he looked at anything else. The 6 letters went out in the 12th month and 4 answers came back before the road shut. Idris Hale wrote by return. 1 page. He accepted the survey and named Wend as the first ground. Then he asked whether he might send 2 of his own men to walk the line with Kessa so they could learn to do it themselves next time. That is exactly the right question and nobody else asked it. Fenwick Auber wrote a long, warm, entirely empty letter. He agrees in principle to a survey at some future convenient season. He is 4 years in debt to a Lowmark house and he thinks a survey is a tax. Callus Ormont refused outright. He told me at length that his ground has been dry for 400 years. It is dry because it is above the divide. In about 6 years it will not be, and I have written that down with the date on it. Salter Dane wrote 3 lines. He did not accept and he did not refuse. He asked whether the survey would tell him where the Grey was going next, or only where it is now. That is the question underneath the whole method, and it took Osric 2 years to arrive at it. Dane got there in about 11 weeks. Off 9 pages he was never sent. I still have his last letter unanswered in a drawer. I am going to have to decide about that man. 2 did not answer at all, and 1 of them arrived instead. On the last day of the year in the afternoon, the North Gate sent word. Riders on the Greywater track with the light going and the road officially shut for 6 weeks. 11 men cold on tired horses. They had come through weather that closed the road behind them. No herald, no letter sent ahead, no request for a bed. Aldous Crane has held the wardenship west of the passes for 6 years. He files returns 3 times more detailed than the law requires. He drinks nothing. In 4 years he has asked me 2 questions, and I have thought about both for months afterwards. I have never been able to read him, and I have never once caught him at anything. He came into the yard and got down. He said he had ridden 9 days, because there was something on his ground that he was not going to put in a letter. Then he asked whether I would come and look at it.